We do have a projection to make in the Democratic primary for the U.S. Senate seat in Montana. Alani Bankhead is projected to be the Democratic nominee for Senate in the great state of Montana. Now, one thing to watch here is that there is also a strong independent candidate in Montana, a man named Seth Bodnar. He's a Green Beret, the former president of the University of Montana. There's interesting sort of three-way dynamics going on in this Senate race in Montana, but we do have a Democratic nominee with this projection of Alani Bankhead's win in that Democratic primary in Montana. Looking at the California governor's race with 45% of the vote in, we've got Steve Hilton and Xavier Becerra bunched pretty tightly around 26% right now in the top two positions. Again, the top two finishers will advance to the general election in November. Again, 45%, less than half the vote in, and it will take a long time to count all the vote in California. In the Los Angeles mayor's race, right now, 46% of the vote in, incumbent Karen Bass standing over 36%, and the Trump-endorsed reality TV guy Spencer Pratt behind her by about 6.5 points. Again, California will take a long time to count. Los Angeles may not take as long as the whole state, but it doesn't go fast anywhere in California. As I mentioned before the break, one of the things that we've been following tonight is the dramatic news from our colleagues across town at CBS News who have been going through the bottomlands. CBS News is under a transformation that is driven by the President of the United States, by corporate interests that want federal approval for a big merger, a big consolidation in the media and news business. In order to do that, and maybe because they want to otherwise, they have been essentially bulldozing one of the great news organizations, news brands in American history, CBS News, the home of, among other things, 60 Minutes, the most successful American news program ever. The veteran correspondent at 60 Minutes, Scott Pelley, the most recognizable person on 60 Minutes, the former host of CBS's network news show, and one of the most respected journalists in America. Scott Pelley has been fired by CBS News tonight after a widely reported staff meeting confrontation with the new leadership that was brought in essentially from the classified ads to come run 60 Minutes. Scott Pelley confronting that new leadership about the changes that have happened at CBS News under the new leadership, under the new management, the sort of oligarchic takeover of that news organization, and now the news tonight that he has been fired. Scott Pelley has put out a statement tonight, just in the last few minutes, in response to being fired. I would read it to you, but listen to me. I sound like I've been gargling with steel wool. Luckily, Jen Psaki is here and is going to read the statement.
I'm going to be your spokesperson, sort of. Yeah. This is incredibly powerful. We were just talking during the break about everybody needs to hear every word, so I'm just going to read every single word so that the audience hears it. It starts this way. There's never been anything in America like 60 Minutes. The Sunday tradition is the most successful program of any kind in history. For more than a decade, its innovative growth on every major online platform has extended its reach to countless millions around the world. This spring, at the end of our 58th season, 60 Minutes grew rapidly with an unheard of 9% jump in viewers on CBS. 60 has been the #1 program in America for decades because our beloved audience finds integrity, quality, and humanity in our stories. When stewardship of the program passed to my colleagues and me, our responsibility was to expand energetically into a new age of media technology while preserving the values our audience expects. Now, the new owner of our network is casting this legend aside, apparently to curry a moment of favor with the Trump administration. The waste is heartbreaking. Last month, 60 Minutes lost its DNA when our entire senior leadership and 2 of our best on-air correspondents were cruelly fired without cause. Good people were silenced because they stood up for our audience. They stood for fairness against the forces of political bias. They stood for professionalism against chaos. For my part, new management has instructed me to inject falsehoods and bias into a politically sensitive story.
Wow.
Oof. I've been told, these are just incredible words to hear from Scott Pelley.
One more time.
Yeah, just read that
For my
again.
part, new management has instructed me to inject falsehoods and bias into a politically sensitive story. This is similar to what Cecilia Vega also had in her statement just last week. He goes on to say, I've been told to include assertions that are unverified.
Wow.
To date, in every case, I have managed to ignore these instructions or refuse them. Recently, politicians have been invited to choose correspondents for interviews on the broadcast. Giving politicians control over 60 Minutes interviews is not how this is done. Finally, incompetence and unprofessionalism in the new management have wreaked havoc. In a case involving one of my stories, the entire program came within 19 minutes of not getting on the air at all.
Wow.
This is 60 Minutes. I mean, 9 million people, I believe, were watching as of last.
And a financial powerhouse.
A financial powerhouse. At 60 Minutes, we have fought harder than anyone knows to save the program that became an American icon. We owed that to our millions of viewers. I am deeply moved by the thousands of wishes we have received to keep up the good fight. Most of the men and women of CBS News are still in that fight, but now the collapse of values at the top has become untenable. The leadership of 60 Minutes is no longer recognizable. The principles I hold dear are gone, and so I must leave as well. I depart after 37 years at CBS with one emotion, a heart brimming with gratitude for the men and women at CBS News who encouraged and enriched my work, very often at the risk of their own lives. I pray for a day when those people and their ideals are honored again, a day when sanity, competence, and courage return.
Wow.
How does the rest of CBS News come to work tomorrow?
How does
let's do
the
it.
rest of 60 Minutes come to work? And how do the correspondents who are still there feel?
And how do the people who are doing this look at themselves in the mirror?
Fine. Let me be clear.
They're good.
They're A-okay.
They're good.
We
They
talked
are
about this
good.
during the break. I would liken this. This is the equivalent.
They're good.
They're doging CBS, right? Elon Musk came into the government, not understanding how the government worked, and bulldozed it. Realized after mistakes, and just left a wasteland. Hated the government he was tearing apart, and there was no evidence that they wanted to rebuild it. That's what we're witnessing here.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also this question that you encounter time and time again in this era in a variety of contexts and institutions, which is when to stay and when to go. And what do you do with, like, if you work at the Department of Justice, right? And you're a civil servant who believes in upholding the law, how long can you hold on at the Department of Justice in the Trump administration? How long, what is the line? When's the moment when you get the thing from the boss that says, go do this thing that's over the line? And that set of ethical decisions that people had to make under these intense contexts of pressure get repeated over and over and over across the institutions that the current administration is trying to destroy.
Can I just make an argument, though? Whenever we look at those organizations and say, how could people say, why aren't they quitting? And we've said this about newspapers and television. These are people's jobs.
No, totally.
Right? These are their lives.
No, and I mean it. I'm not saying how could people. I'm saying I'm saying there are people right now watching this program who work at the Department of Justice who are like good people with great values who believe in justice. There are people who are watching this program right now who work in the FBI or in the intelligence, one of the 18 intelligence agencies that are apparently going to get helmed by Bill Pulte. I mean, across the board, there are folks that are embedded in institutions that are attempting to that sort of nefarious forces of corruption are trying to co-opt or destroy, and have to make evaluations about how they are going to.
I will say one piece of that is when you do decide you have to go. I don't envy anybody.
You got to do it that way.
You have to do it this way.
You got to do it that way.
You have to say why you went.
Yes.
And you have to say what you saw.
Yeah.
And whether you were pushed out or whether you left on your own terms, if it is time to go, I can tell you categorically,
yes,
the patriotic thing to do is to tell what you know.
Here is the thing that I'm focusing on when I look at the CBS story. Scott Pelley is, as you described, just this figure in this time. But there's a new generation of journalists who are coming out of journalism schools and that are coming out of local broadcast and media situations looking to begin this trek. And what struck me in everything that Scott Pelley said was this: new management has instructed me to inject falsehoods and bias into a politically sensitive story. I've been told to include assertions that are unverified. If you are a 27-year-old newly minted journalist who's starting that track, this is what's so dangerous and corruptive and so poisonous about this administration and what they've been doing, is that they're not worried about the past and the things in the present. They want to transform terraform the future. And in this space, in the media space, if I got a young kid and I'm telling him, no, you're going to put this in paragraph 27.
Okay, but here's what you're
What's he
forgetting.
gonna do?
Last week, last Wednesday was the Emmys. And at the Emmys, and we saw 60 Minutes win multiple Emmys, a young man was given the Mike Wallace Award, right? He works, CBS gave him this award, and he got up there. He's not older than 25 years old,
Right.
and he spoke out against this organization that is now being controlled by corporate interests and standing in the way of the truth. So I hear exactly what you're saying, but it also gives me such faith when you watch these extraordinary young people, right?
Yeah, no, but that's exactly the point I'm getting to. How do they respond? And if he's the example of that response, then what you just said, Rachel, about that moment when you have to come to truth with yourself, they can write this letter.
Yes.
Yeah.
They can write this letter.
Yeah. Jen.
I was just going to say, I want to call some preemptive BS on what we're going to hear from the right, which is that, anybody that Scott Pelley, that Cecilia Vega are products of the left, that they are defending Democrats. And I'm just going to say, I worked for 2 Democratic presidents who were interviewed by them. I was grilled by some of them every single day. I had no idea what their politics were. They were tough as nails on every single person I worked for. They called out things that they didn't think should be happening in government. That's who they were.
Yeah.
So anybody who calls that out is total BS. And I can tell you from experience.
Yeah. And I would also say that, Scott Pelley, if you're watching, come work for us. I actually don't have the power to hire you.
Yes, I'm sure you do. If anyone here does.
You have the voice.
But if MS takes a vote, we all vote yes.
We all vote yes.
Yeah. All right. As we are continuing our election coverage tonight, we are watching as results come in California. That governor's race and that LA mayor's election are both cases in which we're looking at top 2 finishers going to a runoff. That's the hallmark of all of these California races that we are watching. We've had some interesting results already in Montana, in New Mexico, where Deb Haaland, we know, is going to be the Democratic gubernatorial nominee. I do want to just discuss with you guys for a second the situation in Montana. Mm-hmm. So Montana has a U.S. Senate seat that is unexpectedly open. Steve Daines, the Republican senator, has the opportunity to run for re-election. People think he's going to, and then he waits until like 30 seconds before the filing deadline, announces he's not running, and oh, by the way, my hand-picked anointed would-be successor
Files his, like the paperwork lands at the same time.
colluded in order to do this. So we got a hand-picked sort of subterfuge, but hand-picked Republican nominee on the for that Senate seat. The Democratic side, we just saw who we've got a winner. We had a primary on the Democratic Senate side, but then there is this independent candidate in Montana, and John Tester, who is the Democratic senator who very recently lost his seat in Montana, has supported the idea of Democrats essentially changing their party bylaws in order to not endorse the winner of the Democratic primary and instead throw Democratic Party support to this independent. This is something that Democrats think could work in Nebraska, think it could work in Montana, but with this actual primary result tonight now, this is a very real thing. What do you guys think is going to happen there?
I mean, there's also this detail, too, where the Republicans meddled here, too, right, in this race. And they spent money trying to boost up the woman who actually won the Democratic primary, arguing that she would work with Trump, right? That was their whole argument. The question is also, did she drop out, too?
Right.
I mean, so that's kind of an open question, because Seth Bodnar, who's the independent, is kind of an interesting, I mean, maybe he puts this in play. Now, what's also a reality is that it is very hard. Montana might be a harder race to win than most of the other ones on the path to 4, right? If we're just like level setting here. But it is interesting because it's not exactly what the Republicans were planning for. It could become a race they have to spend money on, which also matters a lot, too.
We should also highlight, just so that people understand, why it was so sort of I think, dirty pool, what Daines did.
And tell me if I messed it up any
No.
aspect of it.
There's sort of 2 aspects. One is that it sort of backfoots the Democrats because they're not engaged in candidate recruitment and trying to find a nominee. Okay, fine. That's one thing you're doing to the other party. But it also, what it shows, and I think the subtext of it was, I don't trust Republican primary voters to choose a non-psycho who won't put the seat in danger. I mean, that really was what it was about. It's like, if I announce I'm retiring in the year of our Lord, 2025 or 2026, in the Republican primary hothouse that is controlled by Donald Trump, God knows who is going to win this primary. God knows who Donald Trump will endorse.
Yeah,
and so
I have to work the system.
Out of this sort of desire to never let it get before Republican primary voters as much as anyone, they pulled off this whole three-card money, as you described it, to sort of wire his guy in there so that you wouldn't have, either someone who's like totally psychotic and or B, the sort of Ken Paxton scenario where you end up putting something much more in play than they think it should be.
It is in the end result, though, if you are a not particularly interested in politics casual voter in Montana, boy, do you feel like you are in the middle of like an insurance scam right now.
Crazy. Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. Everyone's like trying to get something over on you.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing. All right, let's go back to California. We're looking at some of the House races there. Obviously, 52 congressional seats in California. Redistricting that just happened that put 5 Republican seats very much in question. Here's an interesting one. This is the 38th congressional district in California. Now, Hilda Solis, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, she was Secretary of Labor. Before that, she was Democratic member of Congress.
Yep.
This is her effort, post-serving in the cabinet, to get back into Congress. She will be advancing to the general election in November against a Republican named Pedro Casas. Monica Sanchez was challenging Hilda Solis on the Democratic side, but it will be Solis going forward to the general. Ali?
District 11 in California. This is Nancy Pelosi's district. Interesting developments. 40% of the vote in. Too early to tell what's going on. Scott Wiener's in the race there, 43.4%. Connie Chan with 28%. Saikat Chakrabarti at 13.5%. He's a progressive who, interestingly, did not get the endorsement of some key progressives around the country. Independently wealthy fellow. Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff both endorsing Connie Chan. Scott Wiener, best part of the story, he's 6'7" and runs an ad comparing himself to a giraffe. So we're going to see what happens there. I want to go to this one little area here, District 6. This is Kevin Kiley. You'll remember Kevin Kiley was elected as a Republican. He then switched over to being an independent. He does caucus with the Republicans. He's the only independent in the House. He is running, again, with 40% of the vote in at 25%. Richard Pan, the Democrat, at 22.7%, and then a Republican running at 21%. So this is kind of interesting because, in theory, these votes would more likely go to Kevin Kiley in an election if he were to advance. So we're watching this one very closely. And then I want to go down to District 22. David Valadao is in the lead here with 46% of the vote in. He is the incumbent, 43.7% of the vote to Randy Villegas at 30% of the vote, and Jasmeet Bains at 26.5%. Jasmeet Bains has been sort of supported by the Democratic establishment. More progressive Democrats have sort of refused to put their support behind her and have put it behind Villegas. 46% of the vote in right now. Valadao has sort of stood up to Trump before. He did vote in favor of Donald Trump's impeachment, but at the moment, for whatever reason, Donald Trump didn't put up much of an effort to replace him in this particular race. And with 46% of the vote in, he's comfortably ahead and is quite likely to advance.
Ali, I understand we've just got a call in the 48th congressional district. That would be the one that Darrell Issa used to represent and he decided not to stand for re-election. What's happened there?
That's right. And Jim Desmond has advanced. He is endorsed by Donald Trump. Darrell Issa, one of the wealthiest members of Congress. This is one of those districts in which sort of he got redistricted out. Marnie Von Wilpert was thought to be pretty competitive in this race. She's running 20 points behind with 53% of the vote in, but because of the format of California's primaries, she's also more likely to advance than Amar Kampa-Najjar, whose partner, by the way, is a representative in the neighboring district of San Diego, Sarah Jacobs. So at the moment in District 51, 55% of the vote is in. Sarah Jacobs, the incumbent, is leading with 54% to Ricardo Cabrera at 41%. So lots of very interesting developments in this area.
That's a tough evening conversation in the household. How was your day?
You know exactly how my day is. I have one other to ask you about 13. This is a congressional district I don't know very much about, but I understand we've got a call in 13.
Let me just get to 13. Hang on a second. There's 14. You know, if I am ever in charge of redistricting, I'm just going to make the numbers go in order. 43% of the vote in District 13. The incumbent is Adam Gray. Right now, he's, again, very, very comfortably in the lead, 43% to Kevin Lincoln's 28%. So, but again, when you do the math on this and you add the two Republicans, these two Republicans together, their vote is larger than the 42%. But then lower down, you've got one other Democrat in this race. So this one's going to be interesting to watch. Again, this is one of these things where I'm showing you a lot of numbers where you're seeing 40, 43, 50%. We're getting to up to 55% in some cases, but it becomes very hard to tell because unless the lead is really significant, hard to know where this ends up. But right now, the Republican is in the lead and will advance to the election. He's the one of the two who will advance to the. I'm sorry, the Democrat Adam Gray is going to advance to the election.
Chris.
Yeah, just to stress something that a bunch of people said. Ali was saying it earlier. Is that the earliest batch of votes in California tend not to be particularly representative of the whole, and things can change wildly. I was just looking back at in that LA mayoral race that Karen Bass won against Rick Caruso. In the first batch, she was down 6 or 7 points up through the beginning of the evening when 45% were counted. She ended up winning by 5 or 6 points. I mean, so we're talking about like these because of the different localities the votes come from and polarization over vote methodology. It's not just like a representative sample at all, and in fact things can change and do change quite wildly between 46% of the vote in and 85% of the vote in. So just we've all said this before. I just want to reiterate.
It's just important to know because if somebody decides this is the moment they're going to bed, things may look very different.
Yes, right, exactly.
That's right. And keeping in mind, we can see from the outside some of the relevant partisan dynamics in the governor's race, like when Trump endorsed Steve Hilton, that settled things for a lot of Republican voters who may then have felt comfortable in that moment casting their early vote.
Right.
Democrats having a much more unsettled field until very, very late in the game. Right. It wasn't like Swalwell had everything locked up and then everybody made their decision immediately after he was gone. That coming together late, I think, drove a lot of late Democratic votes, and that will be reflected in terms of when they get counted.
But don't you think so many of these races come down to how are people voting? Are they voting, I'm a Republican, so I'm going to vote for the Republican, or am I voting anti-incumbent? And when I say anti-incumbent, in large part, that's this economy ain't working for me.
Right.
Right? And so you have like two very distinct schools in this country right now, and more people who are saying, I'm actually going apolitical, which is hard during a primary because the situation in the Gulf isn't ending anytime soon. Gas prices aren't going down anytime soon, and inflation continues to rise. So yes, you have people saying, Donald Trump endorsed this person, I'm voting for this person because I'm a Republican, but there are scores of Americans that simply cannot afford their lives right now, and they're saying, hold on, it doesn't matter who I voted for before or who my party is. My life ain't working.
Well, just real quick, that's what makes the California races really important and sort of a leading indicator potentially of what we can see downstream. Because this is a jungle primary. Everybody in the pool, right? And the voters get to decide out of 61 names for governor and of course, for the candidates in the local office who they want. And so to your very important point, are they making that decisions when they're looking at those names and they're thinking about, okay, the economy, or they're thinking about the tribe they belong to? And I think that that's going to be reflected in some of the numbers. And if I just really could put a quick PSA out here at this moment, because what Ali and Chris have been talking about tonight in terms of the California process, we need to understand, this is an example of one process. There are 49 other processes out there that we're going to see unfold this year. And the fact that you have an administration that's trying to game the system and to get people to believe that the processes folks that you have trusted for a long time is somehow suddenly corrupted.
Yeah.
Don't take that hype. It takes time in California. In Florida, it doesn't.
Right.
And that's the American system.
Can I say just some of the things I think are a little interesting as far as what we know right now? Because there's 3 over 70-year-old Democrats who were challenged by younger challengers. As far as what we know right now, and none of these have been called, I think, and Allie can tell us if this is correct, but the last I saw from the boards, they were all running still ahead, these incumbents. That to me is interesting because they were all challenged by people 30 years younger. Maybe that will change. The other thing I think is interesting is Kevin Kiley, and Allie was just talking about this. He re-registered as an independent. He moved districts. Trump, I don't know if Trump ignored him or forgot he was a Republican. I'm not even quite sure. He's criticized Trump on things like tariffs, on the slush fund, and a couple of other things. We don't know how this will result, but right now he's hanging in there, and that is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So these are, it's not, there's always thematics, but those stick out to me as a little bit, I wrote them down early in the night as ones I was going to pay attention to.
Well, let's bring in our colleague Eugene Daniels, who has been following some of these key primaries in the House. Eugene, what have you been seeing out there?
I mean, one of the things that I've heard, Rachel, from folks at the DCCC, which is the, arm, the campaign arm for the House folks, is that they still feel really good. A lot of text messages from Democrats feeling like the things that they're seeing, even as we're looking at some Republicans might be up this kind of red mirage that folks have been talking about, they feel good about November. To the Kevin Kiley race that we're talking about at CA06, someone said to me, there's no level of fake independence that he can generate that will overcome a Harris +8 seat after redistricting. That's one of those seats that they feel really good about on the DCCC side. They also feel really good about California 22, California 48, which became a Harris +4 after redistricting happened. The Tom Keene, where we don't know where the congressman is. They're feeling really good about Rebecca Bennett and her ability to get some folks out there, especially when people are looking around not understanding what is happening with their congressman in this moment. And also in Iowa, 1, 2, and 3 congressional districts they're feeling really good about, partly because Rob Sand, Democrats feel, is a really good candidate, right? Like I was texting someone today, is he one of those folks who can raise all boats, so even if he doesn't win at the end of the day? And that's what they're feeling, is that he's such a good candidate, someone who's been elected statewide multiple times, that everybody might benefit from that kind of thing. I will also say in Iowa, it is still it's still for a lot of folks, it's going to be an uphill battle. But in the Republican primary, what we've been seeing, the Trump guy looks to be losing on the gubernatorial side. And so that tells you that there may be something actually happening in Iowa in a way that folks haven't thought would be true in the past.
Eugene, thank you very much. Always it's super helpful to have you on the phone with folks and hearing from inside what the candidates and campaigns are doing. Let's go to Los Angeles, where Karen Bass, the incumbent mayor, is speaking to supporters as the results still come in from Los Angeles as they choose their mayor.
On that foundation, because we know what a city we have and what a city we can be. And let me just say that tomorrow begins the second half of this journey. Now, you stood with me for the first half. Will you stand with me all the way? Will you stand with me all the way? What happens when we fight? What happens when we fight? Well, let me just tell you, that's what we've been doing over these last few months. We've been fighting because we're not going to let somebody turn back our clock. We are not going to do that. We are going to continue moving our city forward because this is the greatest city in the world. And I just want to tell you from the bottom of my heart, I love you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you for believing in me. I appreciate you for standing with me when others doubted me, because you know who I am. I have devoted my entire life to serving the city that I love, where I was born, and I'm going to continue to do that all the way to victory in November. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, the former Democratic Congresswoman from California, incumbent mayor in Los Angeles. Now, this race is not called tonight, but certainly the early returns out of Los Angeles look like she will be proceeding to the general election, to the runoff in November for her seat. She is obviously fired up and speaking to a very, very fired up group of supporters here. There's been a lot of unpredictability, I think, in this race, both because of the format, but also because of the real crosswinds in terms of what the issues are in Los Angeles and in California more broadly. But I think you're seeing a vote of confidence there, just in the tone, particularly from Bass.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what Jacob Soboroff said. He articulated it so well and so personally about the impact on people in the community he grew up in of the fires, and just how, people feel anger. They feel anger at their government, even if it's not always their fault or it's not always rational. But he also said Karen Bass is hanging in there and she's still fighting. And right now she certainly is. Yeah. There are challenges to being the incumbent. We're certainly seeing that in a lot of races, but she's a fighter. We just saw that in that speech, and certainly we're seeing that in the numbers so far.
All right, numbers still coming in from California in that Los Angeles mayor's race, in the California gubernatorial race, and in all of those crucial House seats. We're going to be taking a look at those and in some of those crucial Iowa races that we were talking about earlier with Eugene. Lots still to come tonight. Stay with us.
Okay, everyone, we are back, and we're going to take a look at where the results are at this point. There are still a lot of votes out there, a lot that we're still counting, and it could be a moment. But here's the latest update. In the California governor's all-party primary, 48% of the vote, with 48% of the vote in, Steve Hilton is at about 26.7%, Javier Becerra 25.8%, Tom Steyer 19.6%. At this point, it drops off quite a bit after that. Let's look at the mayoral race in LA we've been talking quite a bit about. We just heard from Karen Bass, the sitting mayor, the current incumbent. In that race, with 47% of the vote in, Karen Bass is at about 36.6%. Spencer Pratt of The Hills fame is at 30%, and Nithya Raman is at 20.3%. Lots of votes to come. We're following it very closely. We're going to go to the board, to Ali Velshi, get a little update on where things stand, what else you're learning at this point.
Well, you had brought up something. You were talking about some of the districts, the 3 districts in particular, where, the battle, some of the battle, particularly between Democrats, is a generational thing. Younger candidates taking on older incumbents. I want to look at California's 4th district, where 43% of the vote is in. And again, same caveat all night. These are not percentages high enough to determine who's going to advance just yet to the election. But Mike Thompson, the incumbent, is leading with quite healthily with 39.2% of the vote. His closest opponent is the Democrat with the Republican with 23% of the vote. The challenger, the young challenger, 35-year-old Eric Jones, at 19% of the vote. So the old versus young battle here has not worked out for the youngs on this side. Let's go to District 7. Doris Matsui, the incumbent, 43% of the vote is in. She's got 32 versus her closest incumbent, Mai Vang, at 25% of the vote. Again, these things can change, but her lead is relatively healthy here. And then in Los Angeles, District 32, half the vote is in. Brad Sherman, the incumbent, has 37.6% of the vote. Jake Levine has 13% of the vote. Right now, again, sitting in the middle of the two of them, almost a tie at this point, is Larry Thompson, who is the Republican. So it's the older Democrat and a Republican in that particular race. So in this particular instance, and we've seen different stories in different states as we've covered different primaries where this older versus younger, sometimes it's a progressive versus less progressive fight. That's not always the case, as you pointed out, Jen. Sometimes it's 2 progressives. One just happens to be older than the other. But in this particular case, older incumbents are holding on to their seats for the moment.
It's so interesting. I mean, generationally, and we're going to hold your thoughts for a moment because we're going to listen to Tom Steyer, who's speaking right now. So we're just going to listen to him for a moment. He's at his campaign headquarters in San Francisco. Then we're going to come back. Everybody has lots of thoughts.
One candidate, as they stand today, They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred. But here's the thing. Their spending wasn't personal. It wasn't about who I am. It was about what the corporations believed I could do. For the corporations, elections are always about policy. For the corporations, politics isn't about parties, it's about profits. They do not think in red and blue teams. They think in red and black ink. They think in dollar signs and balance sheets. Their priorities and decisions have proved soulless. They're totally unconcerned with the well-being of working people, with the health of our democracy, with the very concept of justice. They will support who and whatever they have to in order to usher in a future that is beneficial to their bottom lines. It's why they uniformly back Trump. It's why they uniformly oppose progressives, and none of that was unique to this race. Here they were just especially brazen, because here they were especially scared. The dollar amounts are different, but in elections everywhere, the principle is the same. You want to fight for working people at the expense of corporate profits? Watch corporations do everything in their power to stop you. Usually they try harder to hide what they're doing, and usually they're confident that if they spend enough, whoever's threatening their profits will be forced to back down and go away. This is how working people have been priced out of our politics. This is how the system protects itself. And I'll be the first to say it, that isn't how the system should work. You shouldn't have to be a billionaire to run on single payer. Or to challenge monopolies, or to call out a corrupt system when you see it. But the system depends on its ability to crush anyone who tries. And I know that there are many, many people, activists and organizers and ordinary working people who are out there today and who have been out there for decades, saying and doing all of these things brilliantly and fearlessly. Those are the people I'm in this race for. Those are the people I'm in this race with. The corporate interests came at us with everything they had, and we didn't back down. We were absolutely uncompromising in our values and our vision for California, and together we've scared the hell out of the corporate interests who are used to getting it their own way. We
Okay, we're just listening to Tom Steyer, who is obviously a candidate for governor. We don't have more results yet, but we'll come back to them. And he's at his campaign headquarters in San Francisco. Which line stuck out to you?
Where he said, for corporations, it's not about red or blue. It's about red, meaning losing money, or black, making money. And that's it. And he said it right there. And the extraordinary thing is, corporations have become, they've always been that way, but especially in the era of Trump, because things are so transactional with Trump. The more money you have, the bigger company you are, you can roll up there and get what you want, giving something to him, writing a big check. So the funny thing is, it's not even like all corporations, stand with Republicans. It's really the biggest, richest ones. Because you can run all sorts of businesses in America right now, and you can say, well, you can call Howard Lutnick and get what you want. You can't.
You can't.
You can call Howard and get what you want, or call Trump and get what you want, if you can write the biggest check there is. And I just think Tom Steyer is bringing up some really interesting points, because I feel like we are watching companies behave right now more transactionally than ever. It's like, when was the last time we even talked about the carried interest loophole? Right? Remember when that used to be a big deal? Now it's not even existent.
But
Here we are.
The thing about that, though, and why that's happening is because they've been incentivized. Mm-hmm. They've been incentivized to engage in this behavior this way. Our system before did not do that. Maybe there was some quiet behind the corner conversations in a room, a cocktail at a bar or whatever, but it wasn't this sort of in your face, this is what we want, what do we get? Call the president, and the president's like, okay, da-da-da, here we go. And then the president gets out and, sits on his little phone, and he says, I want to buy 1,000 shares of X.
We saw the example this week. Michael Dell, months ago, and his wife were the ones who said, we're going to put $6 billion of our philanthropic dollars behind these Trump baby accounts. And people said, wow, that's some serious philanthropy. What happens next? Trump publicly says, go out there and buy a Dell. He goes out there and buys thousands and thousands of shares. And what happens on the back of all of that? Dell gets a $9.5 billion with a B dollar government contract. And you know better than I, when you get one of those government contracts, you getting it for a long time. So that's a perfect example. We just saw it happen in the last week.
And I just know that it's also about the data centers too, with the Dell and everything. Look, at the end of the day, I will just say that there's a lot to talk about with the data centers and Dell and how they're a big player and how I think this is a long-term play with these AI companies. That's just my own personal conspiracy theory, America. Tom Steyer, just right there, he sounded like one of my old bosses, Bernie Sanders.
That's what he sounded like to me.
He sounded like Bernie Sanders, talking about single-payer health care. He talked about climate change in his closing argument. He was making a nod to the Sanders wing of the party, the folks that have been talking about this for a very long time, who ran on it for years in presidential levels, but also in state legislative races, some who have won, some who have lost. And I don't think this is however it goes after a couple weeks, okay, in California, because it could be a little while, America. I think this is something we're going to continue to hear. It is not just, I mean, I think people want to pigeonhole this as progressive, but I think it's populist. And populism, again, Cass Mudd has always said populism is a thick ideology that's mixed with a thin ideology. So Trump is a populist. His populism is mixed with a little ethnocentrism, a little racism, a little sexism, some homophobia, some other E's if you want. Bernie Sanders is also a populist, but he is an economic populist. So I think that we are going to see more of these populism strains jump all around.
I think this is such a good point to end on. I'll just add, the thing that struck me is that and we all know that a couple months before an election starts to become clear what it's about. And corruption and corporations versus the people has been kind of becoming what this is about. We will see. We're going to take a quick break, but up next we're going to go live to California, where Jacob Soboroff, our guy, is still standing by at campaign headquarters for Democrat Javier Becerra in Los Angeles. This California governor's race is fascinating. We're all watching it. We're still getting results in. Stay with us. Quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, we are still watching these races, of course, very, very closely. So I just want to bring you an update on the LA mayoral race. Right now, with 47% of the vote in, Karen Bass is at 36.6% of the vote. Spencer Pratt is at 29.8% of the vote. Nithya Raman is at 20.5% of the vote. We're going to bring you an update on the governor's race as well. In that all-party primary, just as a reminder, 48% of the vote is in. Steve Hilton is currently at 26.7%, Javier Becerra at 25.8%, and Tom Steyer, who we just heard from, at 19.7%. So that's where we stand there. We're going to bring in Jacob Soboroff. He is currently at Javier Becerra's election night event in Los Angeles, and you have clearly a very special guest with you. Jacob, tell us what's going on at the event, and let's hear from your special guest too.
Jen Psaki, we could not have a more special guest here with us tonight. I'm standing here with Dolores Huerta, the legendary labor and civil rights leader, who is here in support of Javier Becerra tonight. Dolores, it's so good to see you. I want to say, just on a personal level, it's been so inspiring to hear you speak out and tell your story this year, and I know so many of our viewers feel the same way. Just first and foremost, I know you've known Javier Becerra for a very long time. How are you feeling about his position in the race tonight and what he'll mean for the people of California and for people across the country?
Well, we're very excited that it seems like he's going to be able to make it to the runoff in November, and because we know that he is a person that probably has the most experience in governing, because he has been in public life since he was a staffer for Lucille Roybal. And so he's been a congressman. He was been part of the Obama's cabinet of Health and Human Services, and then Attorney General of California. So I think we can look at all the candidates. He is definitely the most qualified.
The fight that you modeled for the people that came to the streets in Los Angeles over the last year with your work at the United Farm Workers and after that has been, I think, taken to heart by so many people here as they push back against the Trump administration, these immigration raids. Javier Becerra is the son of immigrants. How important is his personal story in what he can do, not just for the people of California, but in standing up, just as Gavin Newsom has done, to this administration in the years that it has left?
Well, I believe that this will be a retribution, you might say, because it will show the world that we, the Latino community, we are not criminals, that we do not deserve the kind of harassment and treatment and degradation that we got from the Trump administration, because Javier is a shining example of what we contribute to this country.
For the people that might be watching, Rachel Maddow was saying this earlier, from across the country, maybe even around the world, that say California is a blue state, Los Angeles is a blue city. Why do we need to pay attention to the results in California tonight? You say to them what?
Well, California happens to be a very big state, and we know that also what happens in California affects the rest of the country, because we always say that our policies and our politics move east, you know?
Dolores Huerta, again, so inspired by you, your entire career, but particularly the way you've spoken out this last year. We're all indebted to you. So thank you very much. It's great to see you.
I appreciate you so much, and thank you for having this great station that you have.
We love you, Dolores. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Jen Psaki, Dolores Huerta, what an extraordinary night here as we wait for Javier Becerra to address the crowd here in Los Angeles.
Jacob, we never know who you're going to run into, and Dolores Huerta is certainly quite a guest to bring to our audience tonight. Thank you for being here. Before we let you go, Jacob, our colleague Stephanie Ruhle had a question for you, too.
Jacob, when you joined us earlier,
Sure,
you were talking about,
ahead,
obviously, Los Angeles being your hometown and how the fires have affected Angelenos and why so many people were sort of open to this outsider, Spencer Pratt, because he was one who said, I lost my home too, like so many people there. Has he explained, besides, I'm with you, I've experienced it, this sucks, has he explained to the people of Los Angeles what he's actually going to do and how he's going to do it? Because there's often enthusiasm for outsiders who say the system doesn't work. But in his campaign and all the support that he has, does he actually understand the system and policies and explain to people in your city what he's actually going to do to succeed?
Spencer Pratt has a lot to learn, just based on what I have heard from him in this primary election. And there there is an enormous learning curve for a former reality star, a MAGA light person who is, again, as I said to Rachel earlier, talking about the unhoused population here, like Donald Trump talks about immigrants, shipping them off to some kind of, as he says, quote unquote, campus maintained by the federal government. Does he know that there are 15 members of the Los Angeles City Council, that hundreds of languages are spoken in the Los Angeles Unified School District, one of the largest school districts in the United States of America? Does he know in the 400 and some square miles of the city of Los Angeles, the different neighborhoods, the different city council people, the Department of Recreation and Parks, from the Harbor Department, the fact that the Education Department is not controlled by the mayor? I mean, there are so many issues here that we have not heard Spencer Pratt speak out yet about. And I understand the alienation that people feel from city government, particularly people who lost their homes to the costliest wildfire event in American history, particularly people who experience not just the unhoused population on the streets of Los Angeles, but living in the most unaffordable city and the most unaffordable state in the union. But the question that people here are going to have to reckon with is hiring a former reality star who sold crystals online as his most previous job. I wouldn't even call it employment, before he ran for mayor of Los Angeles, who, according to reports, spent literally millions of dollars of his own money before, again, according to these reports, what he believed would be the Mayan apocalypse. Spencer Pratt's got a tough road ahead of him if he wants to be the mayor of this second largest city in the United States of America, in the county with the largest population of anywhere in this great country. And so he's going to have a big test, and we are going to watch it very closely if he does indeed emerge. Looks like those exit polls have him at about 30%, under Karen Bass's 37%. There's still a lot vote left to cast tonight, but it does look like Spencer Pratt is performing here in the early hours of the returns in Los Angeles.
Jacob Soboroff, I could just listen to you talk about your hometown all night. We're going to bring, thank you so much for being with us again tonight. We'll keep touching base with you. Lawrence O'Donnell, our colleague, is out there in California somewhere. We're going to bring him back in. Lawrence, there you are. Lawrence, a lot of results have come in. We've sort of been watching this very closely. We're going to be waiting for a long time. What are you looking at this evening from what you've seen, and what are you watching for?
Well, we do literally have to wait to see how these votes are going to unroll. And at this time in the vote totals, this is usually in this election, this is what we anticipated being the high level of Republican vote. And so it's entirely possible that as the votes are the mail-in votes, especially the mail-in votes of the last couple of days, get counted, which will take a week or so, you'll start to see the Democratic vote going up significantly higher for Becerra, obviously, and possibly for Karen Bass. But I do want to just give our audience a frame of the history that you just witnessed. Dolores Huerta this is not her first election night in Los Angeles. She has been at many, many election nights in Los Angeles. She's 96 years old, and she is still an activist, as busy as any other in the United States. I know I saw her in Los Angeles last week. I know since I saw her about 7 days ago, she went to the East Coast, she went to the Midwest. Here she is back in Los Angeles tonight. She has been on winning campaign stages an election night in Los Angeles before, and historically the most significant was 1968. When Robert Kennedy was running for president and he won what would have been the decisive California primary. And when he won, standing on the stage beside him, along with his wife, was Dolores Huerta. That's how important Dolores Huerta was to Bobby Kennedy's winning presidential primary campaign in California in 1968. And the relationship she continues to have with California voters, the kind of California voters who show up in primaries, who showed up for Javier Becerra, is so important. And it's not the kind of thing that the national media has an eye on or has a feel for. Her connection to those voters in California is longer and older than any California politician's has ever been, and her grip seems to be as solid as ever.
It certainly is. For anyone out there who thinks I'm too old for this, just listen to that interview and watch what she had to say and remember that remarkable history you just laid out. Lawrence O'Donnell, thank you as always for centering it all for us. Okay, many more results to come. We're watching it closely. We're going to check in again with Ali Velshi. He's loading up the big board as we speak with the latest returns. That's just ahead.
So much stuff.
Move past pain with Vicks VapoFreeze. Get hours of pain relief with maximum strength menthol, plus powerful Vicks Vapors.
College!
VapoFreeze your pain.
Shopify's point-of-sale system helps you sell at every stage of your business. With fast and secure payment, card readers you can rely on, and one place to manage it all. Whatever the stage, businesses that grow with Shopify.
When you need fast relief from your backed up gut, MiraFast works naturally with your body in as little as 30 minutes. MiraFast acts faster, works gently. Now find MiraFast in the kids aisle for gentle, worry-free constipation relief.
Guys, the investors pulled our funding.
What? I just bought a jet ski.
What do we do?
I guess I'll just start running a cash burn analysis.
I go tumblers.
Like acrobats?
No, custom branded tumblers from Custom Ink. More water, more productivity, more funding. That's our strategy.
Custom Ink can't fix all your business needs.
I am thirsty.
I want one of those. I want one too.
But we can outfit your team for the road ahead. With over 10,000 swag options, Ink is more than you think.
Started doing the Heimlich maneuver. That didn't work. We had people around us that were in the medical field, and they said, hey, you're doing everything right. Then people started shouting, get the life back, get the life back. Probably been a minute and a half, 2 minutes without any oxygen. He was completely gray. She put the life back right on his face, did it. He gasped for air. She did it again a few seconds later, and the grape hit the back of the mask.
And the ambulance would not have been there in time to save Jeremiah. He was gone.
Be prepared. Go to lifehack.net today.
The Economist has everything worth knowing. Some people read headlines, others read between them. Carry a lasting advantage with The Economist in your back pocket.
Antacid?
It might be more than heartburn.
Pepto-Bismol, sir?
When you have nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, diarrhea.
Great vintage, huh?
And it pairs well with everything.
Pepto-Bismol.
At Credit One Bank, we believe anything's possible.
I'm on Mars! It's freezing. I'm gonna go back to the module.
But leading your team to the championship? Unlikely.
Okay, that's my personal space.
Landing a checkmate against the supercomputer?
I won?
You can try.
I won!
The award goes to Greg.
Some things are out of reach.
No one's gonna believe this. I got this.
But a card with access to exceptional benefits isn't one of them. Welcome to the Credit One Bank American Express Suite. Credit One Bank for what's ahead.
New Sensodyne Clinical Repair is absolutely amazing. When your teeth are sensitive, they need special care. New Sensodyne Clinical Repair creates a protective shield over those exposed areas that can help repair sensitive areas of teeth after 60 seconds. I recommend Sensodyne Clinical Repair.
Okay, we have some results for you. As you can see on the screen right now, Zach Lawn is the projected winner of the Republican gubernatorial primary in Iowa. This is pretty interesting, and Ali Velshi talked about this earlier because Randy Feenstra was the candidate who Trump had just endorsed. He was actually expected to win. Steve King, remember that cuckoo guy? He is the one who was supporting Zach Lawn, helping push him through. So very interesting result there. We have more to share with you. Let's see. Another board comes up. Okay, here we go. The California House, in the California Congressional District 32, this is one of the races we had talked about where there is an incumbent, Brad Sherman, who is over the age of 70 in that category. He was challenged by a more progressive, younger candidate, Jake Levine, who is right there on your screen as well. We now know that these two individuals, Brad Sherman and Larry Thompson, are going to be advancing to the general election. So that was one of the cases where a much younger, more progressive candidate, in this case, challenged an incumbent, was not successful in this instance. In the mayoral race in Los Angeles, with 47% of the vote in, Karen Bass is at 36.6%, Spencer Pratt 29.8%, Nithya Raman at 20.5%. And in the gubernatorial race, with 49% of the vote in, I think Ali's mentioned this could be slow going for a while. Steve Hilton is at 26.6%, Javier Becerra 25.8%, Tom Steyer at 19.7%. Okay, Ali, what else do we know here?
Well, Chad Bianco is in fourth place there, running to the right, well to the right of Steve Hilton, has only won a couple of counties. One of them is Lassen County in northeastern California, where he's 43% almost to Steve Hilton's 32. Becerra at a distant 9.2. And down here in Riverside County, where this is interesting, Chad Bianco's at 27%, and Becerra is in the number 2 place at 24.6. But Steve Hilton's been consistent. These bright red counties are all Steve Hilton counties, and you would expect most of the Central Valley, for instance, to have gone to a Republican. I just want to quickly pull this up. Take a look at this, and I'm going to show you what the 2024 presidential elections. Remember, presidential elections have much bigger turnout, and there are only, generally speaking, 2 major candidates running. But take a look at these colors, and then I'm going to show you the presidential election. It's not that different. There are a few counties, particularly around here and around here, that Steve Hilton is actually doing well in, that are a bit of a surprise. For instance, take a look at Napa County, 40% of the vote in. Steve Hilton's just ahead by 130 votes there, but unusual for him to be ahead there. Over here on the right, Nevada County, 44% of the vote in. This went to Harris in the last election. Steve Hilton ahead by more than 11%. And the same thing with some of these counties down here, Ventura County going to Steve Hilton. So he's in the race again. We're still at low numbers, under 50% of the vote, but that's why Steve Hilton's been able to hold his own. Tom Steyer's still in the race. It sounded like a bit of a concession speech that he was giving a while ago, but that's not quite it.
Ali Velshi, tireless as always. So grateful for you. And we appreciate all of you for spending this big news night with us on MS Now. The latest results are just ahead. Stay with us.
Good to be with you. I'm Katie Tur. It is 1 a.m. on the East Coast and 10 p.m. out west. And as you have been watching, it has been a big primary night across America. Lots of results and lots still to call. Most prominently, the biggest races in California. Polls only closed a few hours ago, and California is notoriously slow at counting ballots, which means we could be in for more than just a long night. Ali Velshi is standing by to break down where things stand and just how close the top three contenders in both the LA mayor's race and the governor's race are. As for the other states that voted, we do have winners and losers, like New Jersey's battleground 7th district, where Democratic voters have picked former Navy helicopter pilot Rebecca Bennett. In November, she's going to face incumbent Republican Congressman Tom Kean, the guy who's been MIA for 3 months, missing more than 100 House votes. Will voters out there want to send him back? Will he even show up for the general? That's an open question. In Iowa, a mixed bag for 2 open seats out there. The governor's Republican primary was just called minutes ago. Zach Lane defeated the Trump-endorsed candidate, Randy Feenstra. On the Democratic side, no real drama, as State Auditor Rob Sand ran unopposed. Not the case, though, for the Democratic primary in the Senate. For the Senate, State Congressman and Paralympic gold medalist Josh Turek faced off and beat State Senator Zach Walz for the Democratic nomination. Turek will face Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, who won over the state's Republican voters. There is also an open Senate seat in Montana, where there will be 3 contenders in the general, as both the Democratic and Republican primary winners face an independent candidate, Seth Bodnar, who's outraised them both. And on the House side out there, we're also keeping an eye on the Democratic House primary in the 1st District of Montana, a competitive seat that Democrats have a shot at this fall. Let us bring in MS Now's chief data correspondent, Ali Velshi, who is still at the big board for us tonight. Ali, talk to me about my home state of California.
As we absolutely will. And one of the things Michael said earlier this evening is it's not just that California is a few hours behind Eastern Time. It's not. The slowness of the counting is a feature, not a bug. It's the way Californians vote. A lot of the vote comes in by mail. Because of the fact that Eric Swalwell got out of the race later, a lot of people withheld sending those votes in. So it's hard to figure out, and it may be days before we know. 49% of the vote is in statewide. Steve Hilton, the Republican, is in the lead, relatively narrow lead, 27% to 26% for Javier Becerra, who was the state attorney general, and he was the cabinet secretary in the Biden administration. Tom Steyer coming in at about 20%. His numbers are similar to what some of the polling showed. Polling is a little bit hard during primaries, but Tom Steyer gave a speech about half an hour ago. Sounded to me a little like a concession speech, but he didn't actually concede. He's still in the race, but it becomes hard to see how he makes up for the difference. I will say that Steve Hilton, this is a pattern you'd be familiar with in California, where Republicans do well in the Central Valley and some of these inland, more agricultural areas. Democrats do well on the coast, but there are a few surprises in here. Napa County, for instance, 40% of the vote in. Steve Hilton has a narrow lead. Over here on the right side, Nevada County, 46% in. Steve Hilton has a fairly substantial lead. Down here in Ventura County, again, 3-point lead in Ventura County for Steve Hilton. So it's be interesting to see how that all ends up playing out. I want to show you what the mayoral race looks like right now. 47% of the vote is in there. These numbers haven't moved all that much in terms of percentages. Karen Bass has about 36.6%. Spencer Pratt has about 30%, and Nitya Raman has about 20.5%. Karen Bass delivered a speech that definitely implied that she believes she will advance to the election. But this has been a tricky race all night. And in the House races across the state, we've seen some very interesting battles. One of them is up here in, there we go, District 6. Kevin Kiley, who was a Republican until earlier this year, there was some redistricting. His best chance of winning was not as a Republican, so he became an independent, and he has prevailed, or at least he will likely prevail. He hasn't prevailed yet. He's got a lead over the Democratic candidate, Richard Pan, with 41% of the vote in. And down here in Southern California, District 48, this was Darrell Issa's district. He was one of the wealthiest members of Congress. He's retiring. This district was also one of the the ones that was redistricted. Jim Desmond, the Republican, Trump-endorsed Republican, is advancing there. But again, you'll see there are some counties, Katie, where you've got upward of 80% of the vote. In most of the cases, it's somewhere between 35 and 45 or 55% of the vote. The distinction in California, as you know, is getting from 55% to 100% could be days, because you could have cast your ballot by mail today, and they've got about 7 or 8 days before they can count that. So who knows?
I know that for House races, certainly for the governor's race. What about the LA mayor's race? Is it usually a long slog to get a winner out there, or at least get a runoff out there?
It's always longer than we're used to in places like Florida and other fast counting states. This one's just tricky because this has been very competitive and people don't vote twice. So if you're in LA, you may have held your vote back. Again, after Eric Swalwell stepping out of the race, we saw a lower percentage of voters sending their ballots in early, a lot more of them voting today or in the last couple days in person and studying what they're going to do. So it probably had some effect on the LA numbers. Hard to tell because the percentages are still similar in LA as they are, and they haven't moved a whole lot. The way it works in LA is there are batches. Early votes get counted first, then votes that come in by mail. In fact, I think in the last primaries, 90% of the ballots were not election day ballots. So, you know, it's hard to know what the effect will be. We'll probably find that.
Yeah, it's maddening if you're trying to get a result, especially if we're going to be watching for the result of who controls the House, say, come November.
Yes.
One last question. The ballots that are sent in, do they need to be postmarked by today?
Yes.
Is there a limit, a time limit to when they need to get into the
They had to be postmarked by the close of business today, and it's not a normal thing where you can just drop it into a mailbox. If you were going to post your ballot, you wanted to post your ballot today, you needed like a particular application of a stamp. It's as if you have to go to a post office. You have to get somebody to sort of acknowledge that you're mailing it today. You can't just slip it into a mailbox and hope it works, or a ballot box and hope it works if you're going to vote today. So again, there may have been a larger percentage of those. We don't know that yet, but the indications are that there's a lot to come. And the thing about California is it can get tricky because the map can look a certain way, and then over the course of the week, it could change. I think the big takeaway from the week, though, or from tonight, is that Steve Hilton was running roughly second place in much of the polling, and he is not by a lot. It's a very small percentage, but he's in the lead at the moment.
Yeah, and when you look at the reddest parts of the state, that is, again, more agricultural sector, more rural sector, that's a lot of red, but the population is not as big as you see in those blue areas on the coast. Ali Velshi, thank you very much. We will check back in with you in a moment. Joining us now, co-host of MS Now's The Weeknight, Simone Sanders Townsend and Michael Steele, who so graciously stuck around for me. Thank you, guys.
It's you know. And I was like, I said, if the chairman's staying late, I'm staying late. We were like, we're staying for you.
I like that you still called the chairman.
You know, it works.
What's party chair?
I know a little something out there about how this process works.
I want to talk about California in a moment, but let's start with Alabama.
Okay.
The Supreme Court decision allowing the redistricting. Your thoughts, Michael?
So, you know, we have watched, and we talk about the arc of history, the arc of justice, the arc of this country, and the direction it wants to go. We have gone through many, many battles over that time period. What is so profoundly important, and I hope the American people kind of get the fog out of their eyes around a lot of other things that, you know, you just can't believe is happening with Donald Trump and all this stuff. What our Supreme Court has done is taken us back to the 1860s, has taken us back to the Dred Scott decision, has taken us back to Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy, by the way, was the case where the Supreme Court ruled that racial segregation under the 14th Amendment was okay. All right? So what we're seeing now is this revisiting of that history through deliberate actions by Republican states to manufacture the cases to get before the Supreme Court and have this court rubber stamp and say, okay. And what's interesting about this decision is that, what was it, Simone, 3 years ago?
In 2023, this Supreme Court said, actually, the map, this particular map, is is not constitutional. And they said it discriminated against black voters, and then today turned around and overruled a lower court panel.
Disingenuous to try to decouple politics with race in the South.
Especially in America, not in
Well,
America.
but Katie, not just in the South. And I think there's a lot of folks who kind of look at the South and go, oh, that's racism. No, have you been to Boston?
I can just take you to a street in North Omaha, Nebraska.
I was going to say, right, you know, the Klan is still active in Maryland. All right. I mean, so the reality of it is we have these issues in large swaths of the country that still boil down to the racial relationship between black people, white people, brown people, white people.
Can I make a point about this to build on what the chairman is saying here? Eric Holder, who was the attorney general in the Shelby v. Holder in 2013, he was the holder. He said today that this decision was factually deficient. He said that it puts its thumb on the scale. And he said that this particular court is the greatest enemy of the right to vote since the post-Reconstruction era.
So what should Democrats do about this if they are able to retake the houses of Congress and then maybe the presidency in a couple of years? What do they do about this Supreme Court?
Well, look, I recently talked to Senator Warnock, who one of the senators who represents Georgia. He came to the Center for American Progress Ideas Conference, and we put it on TV on MS Now. And I asked him, is he for court reform, and what does court reform look like? Expanding the court? He wants to get rid of the filibuster to do these things, and he said everything should be on the table because he believes that there are partisan political actors currently on the Supreme Court. But people should also understand that this is just not about black voters in the South or just black voters in places where the Klan is still active. Black voters have always been the canary in the coal mine for American democracy. After Reconstruction, when the rights of black people in America, particularly in the South, were overrun and they literally took us back to Jim Crow was basically the new chains, okay? It wasn't just black voters that were disenfranchised, right? And so just like with this decision, it is not just black voters that are going to be disenfranchised or black people in this country. Oftentimes, this is an entry point to expand because if it works here in Alabama, if we get away with it in Texas, if we get away with it in Florida, if we can get away with it in South Carolina, if we do it the next time where people really aren't paying attention, then we can get away with it in New Hampshire. We can get away with it in Iowa. We can do it in Nebraska. Just like there are other Supreme Court decisions that are coming down that we're watching about who belongs in this country. I'm thinking about the 14th Amendment, okay? That is not just about immigrants in this country.
And that's an important part because that's the end game. Because when the 14th Amendment goes away, so does Obergefell, so does, you know, the whole idea of a right to privacy. A lot of things start to fall apart because we're living in a space where right now, you still have a right to privacy. So therefore, why can't you have an abortion? They've taken that piece apart. They've taken that piece away. So what makes you think that first part's going to stand and remain?
That's why people have to vote. They need to what advocates have said to us on our show is that voters need to overwhelm the ballot box this November.
And I think what we've seen out there is that voters are very interested in this. They're taking part. We've seen record turnout in special elections. We saw record turnout, by the way, in the last election, even though Donald Trump did win.
There's turnout in Alabama.
There's turnout in Alabama.
Clear, the elections are underway.
There are people that are watching what is going on, and they're saying, I don't want to take part with this. Jacob Soboroff was interviewing a gentleman a little bit earlier today in Los Angeles who said it's so important to vote in primaries, to cast your ballot, and to give yourself a voice to say that they're not happy. You're not happy, or you are happy, or you're not happy with what is going on. I think as much as we fear democracy eroding, and there are legitimate fears out there, I have continued to be hopeful by the number of people that are paying attention and that are also participating to say this is not okay, not just in the marches we've seen across the country, but going out and voting, casting their ballots in what would otherwise be not as popular or not as highly, what am I trying to say?
You know, sexy elections.
Not a sexy
big lights, right.
Yeah.
I mean, look,
where the turnout isn't usually as high.
The turnout, right, exactly. And we have a system that's been set up by the political parties, one of which I ran, that is designed to farm their voters.
Yeah.
So I ask audiences when I speak to them, how many of you in the room believe that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party want everyone who's eligible and legally available to vote? And not one hand goes up in the room. I've asked that question in a room of 100 people and a room of 1,000 people. And it says something what the American people already know about the system, right? So the point you just made, Katie, is important, that when they reach that point, with everything else that's going on, they've just had enough of the crazy. And they want to begin to take control as the founders originally wanted them to, right?
Yeah.
We the people. Then they go out and participate in the process. Our system, though, is not allowed to always have that happen, which is why voters get discouraged.
You made such a good point earlier. Stephanie was talking about the money in politics and how it can flood in from all over, and you could be facing money from another state, a person that doesn't even live where you are, trying to control the outcome of your election. And it can be effective, and it's a scary thing, and we should all be aware of it and try to push back against it. But you made the point that that doesn't mean you're going to win. And I think what we're seeing right now in California, obviously the race has not been called, but if we look at the numbers where they are, with Tom Steyer now in third place, he spent $200 million.
$200 million
of his
for
own
third
money.
place.
And it seems if this holds,
Simone has thoughts on that one.
that Democratic voters are like, I don't really care about all that cash.
Well, I also just
or are
think
turned
people,
off by all that
well,
cash.
people have to think about, particularly as you know, from knowing California so well, the California Democratic Party has been taken over by some of my former people, the super progressives, the Bernie wing of the party. They are now the folks that have been in charge, and they have ran in local spaces and places, it is not necessary. It is not, the California Democratic Party isn't the same as the Nebraska Democratic Party, isn't the same as the Democratic Party in the state of New York. But I do think what voters are responding to all across this country is authenticity.
Yeah.
And in a time where, especially in places like California, people have said, we don't believe there are any good billionaires. I do think that there may be, let me be a billionaire, y'all. Maybe I'll work it out.
You'll be
okay?
a good one.
I might be one of the good billionaires. Give me an opportunity. But there are people that don't believe that there are any good billionaires. And so even though they may appreciate some of the things that Tom Steyer is saying, that he's been saying it for a very long time.
He's still a billionaire.
He's still a billionaire, child. So we cannot give you the keys to the kingdom because we don't believe the billionaires are the way. Again, maybe we'll see. He might shoot to the top after some folks came to vote and said, well, maybe Tom will be one of the good billionaires. That is the beauty of our electoral process.
That's an interesting point, because the strategy, as Simone had talked about early in the week leading up to the night, and we've heard a little bit about tonight, is that there were some who advocated and argued, okay, we just go vote for the billionaire because we want two Democrats to have the top of the ticket.
Yeah.
And so how much does that play into this? How much do people sort of think strategically like that and say, we really want two Democrats to be on the ballot in November, and one of them has to be a billionaire?
I'm not sure they do.
I don't think they do.
Listen, I think that people are turned off by the amount of money there is in politics. I think there's a backlash to the amount of money that's being accumulated by a
Warnock
small...
mentioned Citizens United when I spoke to him. He talked about that. Look, Citizens United, I am somebody that personally believes that Citizens United will never truly be overturned because it will dilute the power of political parties in this country, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party apparatus. One could argue...
No, it won't dilute the power of political parties. It dilutes the power of the outside third-party organizations.
Well, true campaign finance reform would give power to the people, Michael
Do you think... I have to go. I'm being yelled at. But do you think Republicans would be in support of it? I asked Lindsey Graham this years ago. He said absolutely he's going to bring it up, when he's the chair of the Judiciary Committee. He didn't.
Right, and he won't. And he won't.
But do you think, are Democrats really going to support it either?
No, they won't.
Because it is what allowed them to get elected.
I have been talking to a lot
stayed
of
with the person who brought you to the dam.
These people are not, there are Democrats who 2 years ago were not for getting rid of the filibuster, who were not for expanding the court. I remember when the Justice Democrats came out and they were talking about the need to expand the court, and now there are mainstream Democrats who are willing to endorse this idea.
It is one thing to be willing to endorse an idea, and it's a whole other thing to do it.
We know nothing about the future. Things can change. Everyone makes their predictions. Everyone's sure of them. But maybe we are going to come out of this like a post-Watergate moment, and there will be a consensus in Congress that things have got to change, and God willing, we get rid of political gerrymandering. We do campaign finance reform, get rid of
This is
Citizens
why the
United.
Democrats need big numbers in November.
And maybe term limits as well. I have to leave it here.
Yes.
You guys have got to go to bed. Thank you so much for sticking around. I thought that was a really vibrant conversation.
It was very
and
good.
you woke me up.
Particularly for this hour in the morning.
Thank you, guys. All right, so for you at home, stay with us. We're expecting a speech from Javier Becerra at any moment. And we're going to have much more of our special primary coverage next. Do not go anywhere. All right, as we watch the votes come in across California, the great state of California, the crowded field for governor is starting to narrow. Going into tonight, there were more than 60 candidates. Yes, more than 60 candidates in this race. Can you imagine the ballot having to go all the way through it? At this hour, though, we're only looking at 3 real contenders, which means November's ballot will be smaller. Democrats Javier Becerra and Tom Steyer, along with Republican Steve Hilton. Those are the 3 frontrunners. The top 2 of them will advance to the general regardless of party. It's a jungle primary out there. Joining me, host of The Weekend and MS Now senior Washington correspondent Eugene Daniels. Also with me, MS Now's Jacob Soboroff at Javier Becerra's headquarters, and MS Now's David Noriega live from Tom Steyer's headquarters. Jacob, we're waiting for Becerra to come out at any moment. What do you expect him to say? Is that him?
California.
No.
And this country.
No, Katie, I think right now, his daughters are speaking. We heard from his wife just a couple of minutes ago. Javier Becerra, is someone who I've actually known for a very long time. You know, I grew up in local politics here in Los Angeles. Javier Becerra was not just the Secretary of Health and Human Services, nor the Attorney General of the state of California, not just a congressman from this part of Los Angeles, but also a state legislator who ran for mayor of Los Angeles. The same year, members of both of our families sought out that office here in what I think you and I both think is the greatest city in the entire world. And he has been a member of this community, politics, social and otherwise, for a very long time. He's somebody I think most people here would say is an understated person when it comes to politics, but his turn on the national stage made him, and especially when he was the state attorney general, a main foil of Donald Trump. As he walks out on the stage and greets his family tonight, it strikes me that he's somebody also who's always had the persona of a family man, someone who connects with people from all walks of life. He is the son of Mexican immigrants in a state with a 30% Latino population. The man you're looking at on the screen right now represents more than just politics to so many people here. Let's listen to Javier Becerra, former Health and Human Services Secretary, on his way to potentially becoming the governor of California.
Primeramente, if I can begin by first saying to Carolina, Clarissa, Olivia, and Natalia, thank you so much. Gracias. Thank you to my family. You are. The California dream, it's alive tonight. And you see, I get to hug it and kiss it every night. We stand here at the birthplace of El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora, la Reina de Los Ángeles del Río de Porciúncula, better known as LA. Like my family, LA is the starting line for millions of success stories across this state. And here in Hollywood's hometown, we love a good underdog story. So I got one for you. Se puede. 2 immigrants, $12 and a dream. They came to California in pursuit of a better life. A construction worker and a clerical worker. They faced long odds, hard obstacles, doubt and discrimination. But they've got ganas, guts, grit, and game all wrapped up in one. It keeps them putting one foot in front of the other. Cut to 7 decades later, their son, the product of their sacrifice, first in his family, to get to a university and get a degree, takes his own leap of faith. He dares to run for California's higher office, the office of governor. A campaign fueled by little more than grassroots support, some sweat equity, and the full faith and confidence that California is always worth the fight. Almost immediately, he's counted out, an afterthought, overlooked by many, outspent by a ton. Even called along the way to drop out and save us all the trouble. Well, guess what? The underdog stayed in the fight. Like my parents, I never gave up. Never stopped putting one foot in front of the other. Never stopped believing in the beacon-like goodness of California. And thankfully, neither did you. Because we know the true miracle of democracy is this. After all the exhausting ads are run, the pundits are spun, and the billionaires try to buy their way in, it's the people, only the people, who get the last word. And tonight, the people of the great state of California, in the greatest nation on earth, have spoken. Loudly and proudly. And while I take nothing for granted, there are lots of ballots left to be counted. It appears that we are on track to advance to November. One step closer to the son of those hard-working immigrants, Maria and Manuel Becerra, becoming the next governor of the great state of California. Now, that's more than a Hollywood ending, more than a milestone. It's the everyday miracle of living in a state that regularly makes the improbable seem inevitable. And I couldn't have done it without you. The doctors who clocked double shifts but still found time to canvass. The teachers who became our best volunteers the minute the afternoon school bell rang. The small business owners and union members who kept our economy running by day while walking door to door at night. The firefighters, the janitors, the caregivers, the nurses and longshoremen, the students. Most of all, I wouldn't be here without Carolina, Clarissa, Olivia, and Natalia. You are my superpower. You are my secret sauce. Everything I do for families just like ours who deserve their shot at the California dream. You know, I ran for the job because I know how important California is as a shining light to the world, radiating hope, freedom, opportunity, an unwavering belief in science, public schooling, enterprise, and foundational justice and human rights. California is America on fast forward. It's gleaming spotlights on the better angels of a more perfect union. A preview of an America, not just for the privileged or the partisans, but for all the people, by the people. An economic engine so powerful, so diverse, with more jobs, more capital, more R&D, more GDP. We lift up the entire nation. We are America's center tent pole. But I also know there are powerful forces aligned to darken our light. Distrust, disinformation, division, and distraction. Make no mistake, those forces did not want tonight to happen because their success depends on our failure. The last thing these forces want is a working-class governor with a law degree and a union card ready to call them out. They know that I can't be bought. They know I can't be bullied. And they know I will not back down. Now, we also recognize that despite all of California's growth and innovation, wealth and workforce, there are still too many Californians who feel shut out, priced out of the winner's circle. They feel disconnected from the economy, from our government, from the job market, the housing market, and from one another. In this new world, it feels like the old guarantees no longer apply, and the promise of a brighter future is an artifact of the past. For all of California's greatness, we sometimes struggle to meet the standards we set for ourselves, or to be the example that a divided nation or the next generation of dreamers so desperately need us to be. Which is why, as your governor, I am ready to lead the fight to uphold California's promise. To make sure we have the governance worthy of our gifts. To ensure everyone, regardless of where you live, what you've learned, who you love, how you look, everyone has a rung on California's ladder of opportunity. It starts with access to affordable homes. We are going to launch a building revolution in California, starting with the thousands of shovel-ready housing projects already in the pipeline. And in America's wealthiest nation-state, no excuse is acceptable for allowing people to live unsafely on our streets. A healthy economy also needs healthy communities. So we'll restore the promise of affordable health care with universal access in California, including our underserved and rural communities. We'll expand our global leadership on climate, safeguard our air, our water, and our coastline. And we will never surrender green growth jobs of the future to Washington politics or international competitors. We will invest in our schools like we mean it. Expand early education, childcare, and paid family leave, the real family values. We will fortify our second-to-none system of higher education, delivering the next generation of California leaders. We will defend our children from the epidemics of gun violence and dangerous street drugs, and treat public safety like a first-order principle, because it is. We'll be big-hearted, sure, but tight-fisted with our taxpayer dollars. We'll build a government that runs not on promises, but on time and under budget. And one that holds itself accountable when it doesn't. We will protect the right to vote for every voter, for every community in every corner of California. And we will defend the rights of women. No exception, no equivocation, no retreat.
All right, so Javier Becerra there saying that he believes he's going to advance in this runoff to the general election. We haven't called anything yet, but he is in the top three with Steve Hilton and Tom Steyer. We do have a little bit of news to deliver on the LA mayor's race. Karen Bass will advance to the runoff in the mayor's race. That does not mean she wins. She is just advancing to the runoff so far with Ali Velshi, nearly 50% of the vote in. It looks like Spencer Pratt is in the second place position as of now, at least.
Yeah, and that's the important thing. This is like a lot of southern states where if she had gotten more than 50% of the vote, then there wouldn't be a runoff, but she didn't, and that's not likely. But more than 50% of the voters so far have cast the ballot for a Democrat as opposed to a Republican. However, there are a few reasons why you're not going to get a call, perhaps in the governor's race or an advancing of these candidates tonight. Two of the reasons are procedural. They've got to do, Katie, you know this, with the way California votes. And there are a couple of things there. Number one, there is often a very big swing in these numbers between where we are now, 50% and 100%. In a lot of places, you see where the numbers are as a trend that continues. That's not the case in California, typically because Californians vote very differently. The overwhelming majority of Californians vote by mail. There's some early advance voting at vote centers. It's not something Californians typically do. 9 out of 10 ballots in California are done by mail. About 1 in 10 tend to be election day. However, little of that got switched around this time because of the removal of Eric Swalwell from the race. There were people who had decided to support him, and when he got out of the race, it's not that people immediately had a second choice or a ranked choice voting system. So a number of Californians who would have mailed their ballots in decided to hold on to them. Lawrence O'Donnell mentioned that he was one of them. They keep their vote and then waited until today to either mail it or do it in person. If they did it in person, it'll get counted. If they mailed it, it could be 8 or 9 days before they're counted. And then the third thing that matters is that right now, this 50%, these are based on the estimates of the number of people who are going to vote. But again, because of the number of people who showed up today, because of the number of people who may not have cast their ballot or may have cast their ballot today by mail, we don't know if the denominator changes. So we just don't have enough accuracy in this particular vote, in the governor's vote, to know whether or not somebody is going to advance. We can take guesses, and the guesses might be right, but we don't want to be in the business of guessing. In the California case, it's still 48% of the vote, but the difference between Karen Bass's vote and Spencer Pratt's vote is enough to suggest that while Spencer Pratt and Nithya Raman might have some fighting out to do, Karen Bass is probably in a comfortable enough position that we can say with a 27,000 vote lead where she's going to advance. So that's why we're able to advance Karen Bass, but we're not likely to advance any of the governors at this point into a position where they are advanced to the next level. And that'll be the case in several California races where you're wondering, why can't we get a better number? It's just the way California votes. And again, it's not a bug. It's a feature of the system.
It is a feature of our system. It's why we love the state of California.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful place. Lots of things come easy, but not all. You got to work for. You got to work for your vote out there.
That's right. You really do. I mean, I was commenting on the books you get, the things people study, and then the books that advocacy groups send you. You know, they're really pamphlets, but they're kind of like books. There's a lot of you got to read. They make voting easy, but the decision-making is hard.
Well, what I love about California is that they put propositions to the people routinely, and it gives the state a lot more say in the laws that are passed and how it's governed.
It's participatory democracy.
I do wish they'd bring that to a lot of other places. I think we could use it nationally as well.
But it's tough on cable news in the middle of the night, right? When people want to know who won.
I know, but you know,
That'd be a
we're
couple
employed, so let's be happy
We're here
about
the
that.
whole time.
We're here. All right, Jacob Soboroff still with us. Jacob, as I understand it, you are with a gentleman I last saw underneath the streets of Los Angeles, wearing a hard hat. Who do you have with you?
It's the guy that was cleaning your sewer, Katie. No, it's actually the former mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti. Hold on, I don't want to bug him. Mayor Garcetti, when you have a second, come over because we're live on MS Now. Come on down. Katie Tur was just saying the last time she saw you was under the street wearing a hard hat as they were building the metro line on Worcester Boulevard, which is now open, Katie.
And Katie, they say never wear a hard hat at a groundbreaking, but it was, you know, very compliant with OSHA rules.
It was very compliant. Also, the former ambassador to India, you served in the Biden administration with Javier Becerra. What's it like for you to hear, I'm going to ask you about the mayor's race in a second, but to hear Javier Becerra tonight, we haven't declared him advancing to the runoff, but seems certainly like he's in a good position tonight.
Javier's been a dear friend for a long time. He was my representative in Congress. And to see somebody who, you know, my grandparents came just like his parents here with nothing in their pockets from Mexico. The symbolism of this moment, to see such division coming out of D.C., such kind of partisan passion, and to see the calm, consistent, you know, man that this is, I think it's the perfect counterbalance to everything that we're seeing in our country that is like, no, you have to be indecent to get attention, you have to be shrill to get onto the feed. This shows that people might be looking for something different, a steady hand that is actually full of integrity.
This is a man who's been at it for a very, very long time. Let's turn to the mayor's race and talk about what we're seeing now. We did call that Karen Bass is going to advance to the runoff election here. It's still pretty tight between, while Spencer Pratt is ahead, between Spencer Pratt and Nithya Raman. What do you make of this whole Spencer Pratt phenomenon in the wake of both the fires? And, you know, he's been talking a lot about a crisis that you had to deal with here as well, which is the largest unhoused population in the country.
Look, it's easy, I think, to get clicks. It's much tougher to govern. And I think that people can use the vehicle of the anger that we all have and never dismiss people's anger. It's real. You know, when people see something that happens on the street or if they're a victim of crime, they don't want to hear the crime statistics. But as Mayor Bass said, been progress on homelessness, progress on crime. it's not enough. And that seems to be a good counter message to what we're hearing come out of Pratt, which is just, hey, I'll bring smart people around even if I have zero experience. Governing takes experience. It's good to have at least one job before you're mayor of a big city, in my humble opinion. But I understand that anger that's out there, but I think it's a good night for the mayor, too.
As someone who was the president of the city council, I think the youngest member of the Los Angeles City Council ever, maybe Alex Padilla was before you. What do you make of this campaign of Spencer Pratt and why so many people seem to be so taken with him? Does he have any idea what it takes to run the second largest city in the United States of America?
I don't know. I don't know Spencer, but I would say this. It takes some time to learn the skills of governance, just as it does for journalism or carpentry.
I'm still learning.
Be a dancer, exactly. You're doing a pretty good job, though. But you know you're better today than you were 10 years ago. And this is not a place you learn on the job. So it's not a personal thing against him, but you do want a steady hand. I think it's the reason that Javier Becerra was just selected by a plurality of voters. It's the reason that Karen Bass maybe was selected by a plurality of voters here. Experience does matter. You need to be able to also be felt and heard, so I think that anger venting is positive, but at the end of the day, that doesn't solve problems. Coming together does.
Mayor and Ambassador Eric Garcetti, when you said that my journalism has improved, I heard Katie Tur laugh in my ear.
Not as much as yours.
I heard that, Katie. I heard that. Thank you. It's good to see you.
Great to see you.
I definitely did,
Katie,
'cause
go ahead.
The last time we were with him was about 10 years ago, so I think he was thinking about maybe the interview that we did back then regarding LA and transportation and housing, and thinking that you are doing a better job now. Congratulations, Jacob. Appreciate it.
You know, I am going to have my own show, Connect with Jacob Soboroff, starting June 13th here on MS Now, Katie. I hope you'll be a guest, but I know you don't like to work the weekend, so maybe we'll see.
Always be promoting. That's the lesson of Jacob Soboroff. All right, Jake, don't go too far.
See you, buddy.
Stick around for us. But I do want to talk about Spencer Pratt, and I want to get your thoughts on it. I'm going to bring in former CNN chief White House correspondent and founder of News Not Noise, Jessica Yellin. Really good to have you. Spencer Pratt reminds me a lot of the infancy of the Donald Trump campaign. A reality show star who understood that in reality TV, attention was what mattered. It was the currency of that form. And he transferred that to campaigning, getting attention at all costs. It doesn't matter what the attention is. If everybody's talking about you, you suck up the oxygen, and that will translate into votes. Spencer Pratt seems to have learned that lesson organically or not, and he is using it to his advantage, speaking clearly bluntly about the problems that face the city of Los Angeles. But as Jacob and the mayor were just pointing out, not a lot of solutions behind that. Help me diagnose Spencer Pratt as a popular candidate in the city of Los Angeles.
You know, Katie, it's interesting. From the national perspective, it would seem that his campaign success really has to do with his effective use of social media and those AI videos that most people watching have probably seen by now, maybe to their horror, but people pay attention to them. In LA, his success, I think, has to do with something related but a little different, which is he has sort of embodied, become the avatar for a certain specific type of LA rage. There is an intense and deep frustration in some quarters of the city about crime, about homelessness, and about the fact that the response to the fires, I've said, moves at the pace of the DMV, right? People feel deeply frustrated. And as you know, as a former Californian, there was this intense panic after the fires that our leadership wasn't there to take care of us in a way, right? Mm-hmm. That's how people felt. And he's capitalizing on that. The problem is, as Jacob said with the mayor there, former mayor, a lot of not only does his campaign lack some policy solutions, a lot of what he's promising is not under a mayor's control. Crime has actually gone down. Homelessness, for every 100 people the mayor moves off the street in Los Angeles, another 110 or more are made homeless because housing is so unaffordable in the state. And then finally, so much about the slow response to the fires has to do with state and federal approvals that are held up because FEMA is frozen. So yes, he's capitalizing on this rage, but there's a misleading indication that he could solve that as mayor, and really, you got to do that in partnership at all these levels, which he isn't talking about.
I had Morris Katz on the other day, who was kind of the brains, the genius behind the Mamdani campaign here in New York City, the success of it. And I asked him about Spencer Pratt because Spencer's been able to dominate social media in the same way that Mamdani did, obviously two very different candidates. And I said, what do you think of Pratt as a candidate and the success that he's experiencing? And his diagnosis was that it wasn't, his success is an indictment of the Democratic Party. That might be a flattening. But when you're talking about the slow response from the state government in California, California is run by Democrats. So that rage that he is channeling is rage toward the Democratic Party. How do Democrats counter that rage when his frustrations are because of the the lack of urgency or the lack of efficiency in the democratic system in the state of California?
I think it's an absolutely fair critique, and it will be a real challenge. For example, if Javier Becerra becomes the gubernatorial candidate leading as a Democrat. Listen, what could they do? They could blame Trump. Obviously, that's something Democrats do nationally, and they could do that locally. And, one of the things Tom Steyer is doing, the progressive, is he's running as sort of an insurgent against the Democratic Party. He wants to shake things up, do things differently as a progressive from the left. Becerra wouldn't have that ability running as the Democrat statewide. I think Karen Bass, she's going to have to coast on the assumption that most Angelenos know her, that she can turn out the union vote. I mean, it's really just going to be an establishment play by her. And the one thing I'll add is we have not heard a lot about two issues that really do matter to California voters where Republicans will not do well, which is abortion rights and ICE. California is the most pro-choice state in the nation and so deeply opposed to mass deportation. So those are two issues Democrats can run on.
It's also got a giant agricultural center that relies on migrant labor. Yes. It's not a place where the Republican politics of deport them all or, stop abortion, it's not a place where that works. Jessica Yellen, always good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. Really good to see you. All right, we've got much more of our special primary coverage after the break. Don't go anywhere. All right, while California counts and counts and counts, let's check in on Iowa, Montana, and New Jersey. Joining us, political reporter for Semaphore, Dave Weigel. A lot of these races could end up being deciders for who ends up controlling the House and the Senate. What stood out to you tonight in the results?
It's a wonderfully chaotic night in the states that have finished counting, or mostly finished counting. So we have the first real defeat for the president in Iowa. He endorsed Randy Feenstra, the congressman for governor. Feenstra ran, everyone would tell you this in Iowa, ran a really mediocre campaign, resting on his Trump endorsement, not competing with Zach Lane, who ended up beating him in forums. And he was punished by Republican voters for that. And so Democrats got what they wanted. D.C. Democrats got what they wanted in Iowa. They were hoping, Rob Sand had no competition for governor. They were hoping to see Josh Turek, the state rep, win that Senate nomination. He did by a landslide. So they feel pretty good there. They feel good. Democrats I'm talking about in New Jersey, where Rebecca Bennett is going to be the nominee against Tom Kaine. That's a race where Republicans were spending money to help a weaker, they thought, weaker candidate beat Bennett, who has kind of the same profile as Mikey Sherrill, a veteran without much political experience, won very easily. But at the same time, where there's a safe progressive seat, progressives have been winning it. Progressive Adam Hamway in New Jersey, despite some coverage about the work he did or a charity connected to the original World Trade Center bombing planner. That story was pretty hurtful in the last week. He won going away in a very safe district that includes Trenton and Princeton in New Jersey. And I already saw Republicans attacking him. So you're going to see the rest of the primary season, Republicans trying to elevate where they can with money progressive candidates, and where they win, trying to tie them to the rest of the Democratic Party. But in competitive seats, Democrats are getting the nominees they want.
Let's put up the Iowa Senate results again, if we can, because I'm curious to get your thoughts on Josh Turek and his chances against Ashley Hinson.
Yeah, so no Democrat has been able to win as a non-incumbent a Senate seat in Iowa in quite a long time. Tom Harkin was the last one who could pull it off. They lost to Joni Ernst twice, albeit by single digits. Ashley Hinson is a strong candidate who, just as soon as she won in 2020, Republicans saw as their next Senate nominee someday. They thought it would be with Chuck Grassley retired. But Turek, he held on to a seat, the kind of seat Democrats have been losing in Iowa, working class white district. He was able to hold on to that seat with his story. He's a Paralympian. He was disabled at birth, but from Agent Orange damaging his father in the Vietnam War. He beat Zach Walz, who's a progressive, strong campaigner from Iowa City. But the Turek argument was, I've been able to win at least some Republican voters. Give me a race against Ashley Hinson, and I, as the slightly more moderate candidate, a populist candidate with a great story, can convince people to, in an open seat race with the president not being popular, to take a chance on me. That is the race Democrats wanted. It is uphill, but if you're listing the competitions Democrats are trying to make in these Senate races this year, right after that first tier of Maine and Georgia and Michigan and Alaska, Iowa's right there. They really do think that they got the best situation out of the state tonight.
You know, maybe because it's almost 2 in the morning, but when you say take a chance on me, I can't help it, Dave. I start to sing ABBA in my head, but I will spare you from that right now. Dave Weigel, really good to have you. Thank you so much for staying up late for us. And sit tight. The next hour of our special election coverage starts after a quick break. Good to be with you. I'm Katie Tur. It is 2 a.m. on the East Coast and 11 p.m. out west. The busiest primary day of the year is coming to a close. Voters across 6 states have cast ballots. In California, Republican Steve Hilton and Democrat Javier Becerra are the current frontrunners for governor. We heard from Hilton just a moment ago.
We've had enough ideology in California, haven't we? It's time. It's time for positive, practical things. I'm fighting for working people in California so that you can keep more of what you earn. So we restore that basic dream, a good job where you make enough to raise your family in a home of your own, in a safe neighborhood with a good school so your kids can have a better life. We've got everything we need to make California golden again, except for a good governor, and very soon we will have that as well. We are gonna make that change happen.
In the Los Angeles mayor's race, incumbent Mayor Karen Bass has advanced to a runoff, and in Iowa, the race to replace Senator Joni Ernst is shaping up. Democrats hope State Representative Josh Turek can flip the seat in November. He's up against Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, who secured the Republican nomination. Meanwhile, the redistricting race has hung over the midterms. Earlier tonight, the Supreme Court ruled that Alabama can use new congressional maps that eliminate one of 2 majority black districts. Let's go now to MS Now's chief data correspondent, Ali Velshi, who is at the big board for us still tonight. So, Ali, take your pick. We can talk about the races that we already know about, but I guess I'm still curious about California. Are we going to get a result in the mayor's race tonight beyond Karen Bass advancing?
No, because the distance between her and the second place candidate is enough that we're confident that she'll advance. As you know, she had gotten 50% of the vote. She would have won the election. It was not ever predicted that would be the case. It's very rare. It's just one of those. California's got a lot of peculiarities. The other thing about California is it's a really big place. So it's really different across the state. And there's sort of 3 races I want to show you that I think will tell you about interesting things that have happened. This is California District 1. Now, when I take charge of the world and redistrict, District 1 will be the first district. It won't be the second one, but that's not my problem. District 1 was represented by Doug LaMalfa, who passed away. Then it got redistricted. So 2 things happened tonight. There were actually 2 elections. One was to replace him for the remainder of his term. And the second one, which is the one we're looking at here, is the actual primary in which two candidates will advance. Now, we haven't got all of the vote in there. We only have 48%, which is typical of what we've got at this point in many parts of the state. But a Republican and a Democrat have advanced. Now, James Gallagher will probably end up filling out the term for the rest of the term in the general election, but there is an opportunity here in the redistricted District 1 for a Democrat to take that. So that might be one of those 5 seats that Democrats are hoping to take from Republicans. Another one that was redistricted was right around Sacramento, District 6. Kevin Kiley was the Republican who was elected in that constituency. He then changed. He became an independent this year because after the redistricting, there was no likelihood or very little likelihood of a Republican winning that straight out. Now, the Republican has got 21.8% of the vote with 42% in, which is very close to what the Democrat has. But Kevin Kiley is in the lead right now. So that's an interesting piece of math. We'll have to wait. We don't have enough of the vote there to understand exactly how that's going to play out. And the third one I want to show you is District 22, which is west of Fresno. 49% of the vote is in there. David Valadao, the Republican incumbent, has survived in that race so far. He's well ahead, as you can see, of the other two candidates. Now, there are some reasons for that. Jasmeet Bains has been supported by the Republican establishment, including the DCCC. More progressive, the Democratic establishment. More progressive Democrats decided that they wanted to support a different candidate. So when you look at you add up this, it comes up to more than what Valadao got. But Valadao was one of the only Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump. So he's got a sort of an independent streak to him that has been appealing in that district. Again, 49% of the vote in. Looks pretty likely that he'll be advancing, but it's unclear. It's also very likely that the Democrats here will coalesce. So that'll be a very interesting one to watch in the election. And throughout California, there are so many races that are like this. California is just not one of these places that you can draw a trend. You can draw some general trends, which we've seen, and that is that in the more agricultural, inland, less urban parts of the state, they vote Republican. The coasts tend to vote Democratic. But you can see some interference here in the governor's race. Steve Hilton is winning in Ventura County. Steve Hilton, sorry, I just heard somebody tell me that we've got somebody advancing. I just want to hear what that is again. Okay, so we are going to get news very shortly, probably. We're just doing the math on this, that Valadao is probably going to advance in District 22. We're watching that very closely. That makes a lot of sense, given the difference between the number 1 and the number 2 spots there.
Ali, California just redistricted. What can you tell us about the results we've seen so far? Is it too early to say whether that redistricting was a success or will be a success for Democrats?
It's early to tell. I would say they've estimated that it will net them 5 seats, and it's quite possible that that's true. But you can never know what voters care about. And one of the things you pointed out is the reason Californians, when they go vote, get that book is because it's a very policy-oriented election. They always are. Remember how many people showed up for Prop 50? Yeah. So Californians vote on a lot of California issues. Part of why Steve Hilton has had the appeal he has, that some people are not getting up and voting for a Democrat or a Republican or against Donald Trump or for Donald Trump. There are a lot of local issues. So it's going to be more competitive than one might assume. But I would say the math right now still supports the idea that the redistricting in California will offset the 5 seats that Texas created with 5 Democratic seats. Not 100% sure. And again, I always want to point out that District 6, Kevin Kiley is the only independent in Congress. He does caucus with Republicans, but he's an independent.
Yeah. All right. Ali Velshi, thank you very much. Joining us, former political director of California's Republican Party and co-founder of the Lincoln Project, Mike Madrid, former Republican strategist and advisor to George Bush, John McCain, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mike Murphy. He's currently the co-director of the Center for Political Future at USC. And Eugene Daniels is with us as well. Eugene, I want to get your thoughts on California. We've seen the redistricting. Ali Velshi just laid out that it's a little too soon to tell. It is a policy-oriented state. It is a giant state, a lot of competing interests. What we've seen, though, when we're talking more broadly in the bigger cities or even at the governor's level, although I'm not quite sure about it this time, is that oftentimes the biggest personality, the most charismatic politician, the former actor maybe, former reality show star maybe, often does win.
Yeah, yeah. We're not seeing that. I think what you're seeing, and Eric Garcetti said this a little bit, is people are looking for someone to steady the wheel, right?
Yeah.
This was what you heard in the primary in 2020 for Democrats, right? We don't want someone who's too flashy. We want Joe Biden because we want him to be a steady hand at the wheel, someone that we already know. And I think one of the things that's been so interesting, because, me as a political reporter, I'm always looking for through lines. Like, what are the through lines? Are the young folks winning? Are the incumbents losing here? And there's not really a through line.
Yeah.
And so what that tells me is that some voters are willing to try something new. Some voters in California are looking to keep things as steady as they possibly can and go with folks that they know. And some voters are just unsure. And you talk to a lot of folks who kept that ballot and holding on for a very long time. Rusty Hicks, who's the chair of the Democratic Party in California, I talked to him just a little bit ago. And he says all of that kind of gamesmanship and punditry that the voters were doing makes it hard to figure out what the through line is for them.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. Mike Madrid, I'm going to ask you this regarding the loudest voice versus the steadiest hand, the establishment candidate. Karen Bass is so far the only person we've been able to call that's advancing to the runoff in the mayor's race. It could be Spencer Pratt, it could be Nithya Ramos, but so far that is a vote for the establishment to lead. So far. I mean, not the loudest voice. So far, I should say. Xavier Becerra, if he does advance, and he right now is currently in the top 2, again, that could change, he would be another example of Democrats voting for the steadier hand. Maybe, the quieter voice, the not as sparkly candidate.
I would phrase it a little bit differently. I would say
Go
the
ahead.
less extreme. I would say the less extreme candidates here. You've got, Spencer Pratt, who is kind of this performative MAGA candidate in the city of Los Angeles. I mean, good luck with that. He is going to advance in all likelihood, or at least it looks that way. But his runoff is probably going to do worse than Rick Caruso did 4 years ago against Karen Bass, even though she's significantly weaker. The same could be said for Xavier Becerra. This is not an ideological moment right now, which was a profound change in the Democratic base that I don't think people are realizing. I think California may be an indicator here. When Eric Swalwell was leading the field, it was because he was the most anti-Trump candidate in California. That rocketed him to the top. When Swalwell blew up, what happened was Trump's numbers started to drop into the mid-low 30s. People just didn't see him as the same sort of threat anymore, and they wanted experience. They wanted something much less performative. So it's boring, sure, I guess that's one way to put it, but if you're looking at a DSA candidate in Los Angeles versus MAGA candidate, I think probably it's steady, yes, but just reasonable is what they're looking at in both candidates, and that's what looks like is going to be the winning combination after tonight in California.
Is that going to be a message to the rest of the party more broadly for not just this next election, Mike Murphy, but for 2028?
I don't want to be the midnight grouse here, but we're jumping to a lot of conclusions that I don't think. We saw California normal. The establishment Democrat did well. I think my friend Mike Madrid was right. It was all about Trump bashing at the beginning. And then kind of the experienced, well-known, generic Democrat who the interest groups that run Sacramento were not against. They were against Steyer. They were not against Becerra. He's easy to live with. Even the governor, who was not overtly involved, quietly was much more for Becerra than Steyer, the main opponent, let alone a few of the others, because he's trying to watch his flank in a possible presidential race. And he wants to make sure nobody's making trouble at home. So we kind of saw boring normal. We did not have a superstar candidate. So the generic Democrat-based Democrat interest group, acceptable candidate, was the default winner tonight. And I think it will be Becerra versus Hilton. The interesting question is, if you're branded Republican in California, particularly this year, you're probably a goner statewide. But Hilton's a little bit interesting. And I think he will have a small window to say, hey, wait a minute, I am not a Trump clone. I'm a change to everything you don't like in California. And by the way, the voters are extremely unhappy here. The wrong track is 2-1. Maybe Hilton can kind of get himself into the race with that, because if he's generic MAGA, he's done. This is California in a raving anti-Trump year. The other thing in the mayor's race, Karen was always sitting around a third of the vote, but over half the voters say they don't want to reelect her. She is not popular. The problem is Spencer Pratt, who, and I agree with Madrid on this too, is doing gangbusters on the MAGA internet. Not a lot of the MAGA internet lives and votes in LA City. That is a city that Joe Biden lost to Bernie Sanders. The Republican percent of the vote in LA City is about 17, 18%. Independents are another 18%. It's over 60% Democratic. So the Karen team, and I was around some of them tonight, were doing handstands of joy because the numbers are pretty. I know you guys have to be careful about projections, but I will. It's almost, I don't see it mathematically that Nithya is going to be able to catch up. So Bass will get Pratt, the one candidate she can probably beat. And Pratt will wind up with the TV show, whatever he's really banking for. So we kind of had generic normal here, and I think it's hard to draw a lot of big conclusions from it, other than California being California.
I will say that Jacob Soboroff was interviewing a voter a little bit earlier today who had told him at one point in the line that he was going to vote for Nithya Raman. And then when he got to the front of the line, he said he changed his mind to Spencer Pratt. Obviously, that's one person. I'm not going to make any, big conclusions off of one person's anecdotal.
There might have been a bar around the corner, too.
No. He was in line the whole time. But I just wonder, if there are any other crossover voters there and whether Nithya Raman's support, if she does not advance, and again, we're not calling this, whether they're automatically going to go to Karen Bass. Can I ask you guys about Steve Hilton and what the deal is with him? Just some of the conspiracy theories that he's supported in the past. In 2021, he was arguing on Fox News that research funded by Fauci effectively led to the creation of the coronavirus, suggesting Fauci was at the center of the pandemic's origins. Who is Steve Hilton? Mike Murphy?
There are two Steve Hiltons. There's the Steve Hilton who was worked for the Conservative Party at a high level in the UK, who was what we would normally call a moderate Republican. Then crossing the ocean to begin a career in the US, he is no idiot. I know Steve. He's a friend of mine. And I can't speak for him, but he took a look at the Republican primary electorate, and let's just say there's been a little evolution in his views. Now his problem is going to be to try, or he's complete toast, to get to a reset to be a little more like the UK Hilton and show he's a bit of a different kind of Republican. And that may be a bridge too far, but it's, in my view, his only shot.
Mike Madrid, it sounds, and I'm not going to put words in my friend Mike Murphy's mouth, but that does sound like opportunism, doesn't it?
Crass opportunism is exactly what it is, but I think Murphy's right. I mean, look, Steve Hilton, I know him too. He's actually from sort of the policy wing of the Republican Party, which is a very, very small wing of thinkers. And he can actually get up on a debate stage and have a very detailed conversation about everything from water policy to tax policy to housing policy, prison policy, you name it. He's very well steeped. This is a smart guy. But there's also this problem that Republicans have is you've got to genuflect before the altar of Donald Trump, and he has. And in California, that dog don't hunt. I mean, he's just going to have a really, really big problem getting past the QAnon stuff, the COVID stuff, the Donald Trump stuff at a historically bad time for Republicans and Donald Trump specifically. He's not going to be able to surmount that. And that is unfortunate. I mean, California does deserve a robust discussion, whether it's with two Democrats or a Republican and a Democrat. As Murphy pointed out, there's a lot of, concern about the direction of this state, but Steve Hilton's not the guy to competitively put the state in play.
It is exhausting asking people what happened in the 2020 election. Did President Biden win? Can you just say that? And having Republican after Republican who may have said it right after it happened refused to answer the question. And Steve Hilton did that as well. He said, I can't stand that question. It's a game and I don't want to play it. I just don't. I mean, it's not a game. It's an election. It's a fact. And there are just so many people who refuse to say it.
No, but if we outlaw evading politicians who are crassly cynical, we're going to run out of politicians. I'd like to outlaw that. He's clearly dancing to avoid getting pinned down. The real question with Hilton is, because I think Mike and I agree, the Trump brand kills him in California. Can he redefine himself, which will mean tussling with the president? Now, we saw in Iowa tonight, which I think is a bigger, interesting headline than anything that happened in California, that the Trump handpicked candidate actually lost a Republican statewide primary. Gives you an idea of how the ag trouble, the tariffs, and the other economic trouble, high diesel prices, are really hurting the president and not giving him the same grip, even in a Republican primary in a lean Republican state. That is a canary in the coal mine honking about the midterms there, for that to happen in Iowa tonight.
What do you think of that, Mike Madrid?
I think I couldn't say it any better. I mean, I think that's exactly right. I do believe that we're starting to see some of this real challenges starting to happen in the Republican Party. I mean, look, Donald Trump still has an iron grip on it. He did endorse Steve Hilton. He won commandingly over Chad Bianco in California. Trump does still have some sway, but when you lose it in Iowa, when your Trump-backed candidate loses in Iowa, that's not just a blip on the screen. That's something you got to pause and take a look at and say, what's going on? How bad is it here? Are people ready to make a change? And even if it's not just Republicans, it's absolutely going to be these conservative-leaning independents. In places like California, you've got to cobble 100% of your Republican base, a commanding share of independents, and even dent into Democrats if you're Steve Hilton. None of that seems to be in play right now.
What do you guys think of the Montana race for the 1st District? That is a battleground race. Do Democrats have a chance? I mean, it's not even just Democrats. There are, as I understand it, 3 candidates in the race. There's a Democrat, a Republican, and an independent. So it's not really a question of whether Democrats have a chance. The independent has outraised both the Democrat and the Republican there. If an independent wins in Montana's 1st, is that good for the Republicans? Is it good for the Democrats?
Well, this is an anti-Republican wave election. And generally, when people are really unhappy based on more than anything else, economic pain, which is what did in Biden and Harris, now it's doing in Trump, anti-politics candidates who look and sound a little different tend to do pretty well. And running as a charismatic independent can be part of that recipe. So it's very hard for me to find any good news for the Republican Party right now, because the national mood is we got to do something about the Republicans. So I haven't looked too deeply at that race, but in a competitive district, a charismatic independent could do well. We've got the perfect storm for that kind of stuff, as long as they're not the Republican. That's step one.
Yeah, it's Seth Bodnar, who's running as the independent. Again, he's outraised both the Democrat and the Republican there. I do think it's interesting, Eugene, the rise of independent candidates and the places where they can do well. Nebraska is one of those potential places. Areas where Democrats have historically had problems in some districts and some states. The endorsement of an independent or the allowance of an independent to go in there and to run their own campaign and disassociate from the Democratic Party, but then maybe caucus with the Democratic Party once they get into Congress, most of the time at least. Should Democrats allow for that? Is that a good thing for the party to not obviously expand their own tent, because it would be outside of their tent, but to, I don't know, make some room for people a little bit outside of where they're living?
What I hear from Democrats is that they should do whatever they can to get more friends in Congress, right, in D.C. And if that means that there's an independent who might have to run against you, in their rhetoric as they're going through the general, let them do that, and then they'll hang out with, Bernie Sanders as an independent and Angus King as an independent in the Senate, and yet caucus with the Democrats almost 100% of the time. And I think that is one of the things the party is kind of struggling with right now, is we want people to be a strong D Democrat, and it's like at the end of the day, you probably just want the numbers, right?
Yeah.
That is the purpose of it.
Well, for instance, Mike Madrid, what they were saying in Montana, the Democratic Party there, was we're going to run a Democrat. We're not going to cede this to an independent. We're going to run a Democrat in Montana. Is that a good idea?
Well, look, we're going to test the theory of that case, and I think the Montana case is a good one. You are also seeing this on the Republican side, right, with Kevin Kiley. His name just kind of popped up here in California 6, running as an independent as well. I think, Katie, you're exactly right. We are in this era where there is a broad de-alignment. There's so much dissatisfaction with partisans from both sides, even if it's not a majority, although it is oftentimes in a lot of polling with Democrats who are, as much as they despise the Republican Party and Donald Trump, there's huge dissatisfaction within their own party's leadership and policy direction. That's all leading to some sort of vacuum that needs to be filled by candidates who are willing to say, I'm not just independent from the other party or the system broadly. I'm independent from my own party, and I think that is going to be increasingly resonant in this hour of a political environment going forward.
I think you are right about that. Mike Madrid, Mike Murphy, thank you very much. Eugene, don't go anywhere. Our coverage, our special coverage of this primary night comes back in just a moment. In the Los Angeles mayoral race, the incumbent Democrat Karen Bass has advanced to a runoff in November. Last hour, the Republican hoping to face off against Mayor Bass, Spencer Pratt, spoke to reporters.
Well, obviously God wanted 5 more months of me exposing all the failures of our mayor. So it's going to be a fun ride. I hope she's ready.
Are you ready?
I mean, I was born for this, clearly. I'm going to continue to work hard, learn everything I need to learn, build my teams, show all the experience I'm going to surround myself with, because that's a concern people have. Oh, he has no experience. I'm going to build that experience around, and we have 5 months to put the best team the city could ever dream of around me.
Joining us, LA Times staff writer Noah Goldberg. Eugene is still with us. Noah, really good to have you. Explain Spencer's appeal.
Well, Spencer is coming in as the change candidate in an electorate that is really frustrated about what's been going on in Los Angeles over the last 4 years. People don't feel like there's been enough progress made on homelessness. And then you have the fire that happened in January 2025, which is really when Mayor Karen Bass started to see her support erode over and over in polls. We've seen her favorability numbers shoot through the roof. They're over 50% year after year since the fires. And Spencer Pratt, more so than, Councilmember Nithya Raman, who recently endorsed Bass just a couple weeks before jumping into the race herself. Pratt really represents, the change candidate who's not abashed or ashamed to take these shots at the sitting mayor. He is the most vitriolic opponent of the mayor right now. So people who are frustrated with the state of the city, which is a lot of people, are looking to him as a serious candidate.
What's your sense of, and again, we're not calling the next person to advance to the runoff yet. It is way too close between Spencer Pratt and Nithya Raman. But if Nithya Raman does not advance, what is your sense of where her support goes?
I mean, I think a lot of her support is going to go to Karen Bass. We did polling before the election that showed both Bass or Raman was ahead of Pratt by double digits in potential runoff scenarios. So I do think you'd see a coalescing among Democrats behind Bass, maybe a lot of them holding their nose, since even a lot of Democrats are not happy about the job that Bass has done. But I mean, I heard you earlier talking about a Raman voter who switched to a Pratt voter. So people are very unpredictable, but I think overall you would see them trend in that direction.
Yeah, people can be confusing. The fires are what propelled Spencer Pratt into this race. And I think it's important to point out that the fires could be another variable this time around as well. It is a historic drought. The West is very dry. We're heading into the driest months of the year. It's getting hot. There has not been rain. If there is another fire, and hopefully there is not going to be one, but if there is another dangerous fire in the city of Los Angeles, how might that affect this race, Noah?
I mean, you would see a candidate like Spencer Pratt jump on that immediately. I think what you're getting at, and what I've found interesting so far in this race, is there actually hasn't been like a main issue that's come up during the race. There hasn't been a specific incident or a specific fire since Spencer Pratt got into the race. Obviously, he talks about the 2025 wildfires all the time, as do most of the candidates who are in this race. But yeah, it's year-round wildfire season now, and there have been some small brush fires already, but they haven't really become a part of the mayoral race at this point.
The thing is, Eugene, it's very easy to talk about the failures of an administration. Here is what you did wrong. Here's where you were not good enough. Here is what we are angry about. It is very difficult to then diagnose how to fix those failures. And Spencer Pratt, for all of his talk and all of his ability to point out what went wrong, and he's done so well, he doesn't have the experience in governance. He has none of that experience. Have we gotten any indication from him that he would surround himself with people who would know how to do that?
Yeah. He says that, right? You know, there was a moment.
But does he have the connections?
No, right? The relationships he does not have. And I think one of the things that we've seen with Donald Trump is that what ends up happening, one, you end up being surrounded by kind of the establishment, right? They come in and coalesce around you, and then they put in folks who are probably going to keep you away from doing certain things. Or you end up in where we have Trump 2.0 with people who just let you do whatever. Yeah. I think that is one of the things that we're looking at with Spencer Pratt. I think what's so interesting is that voters both in California and LA and around the country are sometimes looking for people to be an avatar for their anger. Yeah. Right? Even if that means they don't know what they're doing when it comes to actually fixing the problem. And that is the thing that Karen Bass is going to have to figure out how to message that, both to acknowledge people's anger, even anger at her, right? Accept that, and then tell them what she's going to do to make sure that they're less angry at her.
So Noah, has she done a decent job of that, acknowledging the anger and showing Angelenos that she has taken steps to make sure failures like what happened in the 25 fire don't happen again? I know it was a perfect storm of events in many ways, but does she address the things that she could have done better?
Yeah, I mean, she gets asked all the time about being in Ghana at the time the wildfire started. And she has said over and over that if she could change one thing, she would make it so that she wasn't in Ghana when that occurred. And I have seen her talk about, you know, she could have done certain things better. Even in one of her major ad spots that she bought on TV, she said, you know, I might not always make the right decision, but I need 4 more years to keep working for Angelenos.
What about the homelessness problem and the addiction problem?
Yeah, homelessness is an animating issue of this race. Bass is running on her record and running on numbers. She says that homelessness, street homelessness, people sleeping in their cars or sleeping on the ground outside, is down 18% over the last 2 years. The issue with the electorate in Los Angeles is, do people feel like homelessness is down? And that is a very anecdotal and personal thing. If there's an encampment outside your apartment building, it might not matter if Karen Bass gets up press conference after press conference and says homelessness is down 18%, because you really care about the issue. You care about what you see. And something that the Pratt campaign has said over and over is, you know, they don't want you to believe your lying eyes. They keep telling you that homelessness is down, but look around, it's worse than it's ever been. So it really just depends where you fall on that spectrum. Do you believe the numbers that the Bass administration is telling you, or do you believe Spencer Pratt that it's spiraling out of control, getting worse and worse?
Yeah, it depends on your lived experience. All right, Noah Goldberg, really good to have you. Thank you so much. Good luck out there. Coming up next, we're going to have Ali Velshi take us through all the results. He's going to go all around the country for us in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. All right, let us check back in with Ali Velshi. So, Ali, talk to me about the Senate.
Yeah, we've jumped to California because that was sort of the thing of the night and the biggest story. But the Senate story, this idea that Democrats can perhaps take control of the Senate, for some people that was a fever dream. But there's actually a roadmap that started to form. Now, here's the story. These are the leaning, likely Democrat, toss-up, lean Republican, likely Republicans. These are the states that political scientists and observers say might be in play. And what happened tonight, the most interesting part of tonight, is that Iowa was likely Republican when we started the night, and we have now moved this into a column called lean Republican. It's a matter of degrees, but what it means is it's a possibility for Democrats. And I'll just show you, oh, I shouldn't have done that. So we're going to just ignore that I did that. But we're going to, the question here is that what Iowa has is 3 open seats. We're going to just pretend this is all on tape, and we're
there we
recording
go
for practice. Iowa has an open governor's seat and an open Senate seat. So the concept is that they've got strong candidates who are able to sort of drive enthusiasm and drive voters out. They might not all win. None of them might win, but the idea that it's competitive, this will be the first time since the 1960s that Iowa has an open governor's seat and an open Senate seat. and it's got strong candidate quality. So it depends on a lot of things. It depends on how these campaigns run, what the mood of the country is. But if November 3rd happens to feel like a bit of a wave, if things are going Democrats' way, then it's quite possible that they take one of these seats. Now, remember, Republicans have to gain 4 seats. So Democrats have to gain 4 seats. So things have to go pretty well for them. But if things are going well, Iowa is now on the table in a way that it wasn't on the table before tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I think that map is so interesting. Maine is also a really interesting race.
Well, that's one that sort of moved toward Democrats. It's still now it's in the toss-up category because Graham Plattner's had a rough go of it recently. And Michigan is a question. It probably still stays Democratic, but they've got a increasingly ugly primary race in Michigan, so that becomes an issue. Georgia, which Republicans were thinking of as a pickup opportunity, is now looking a lot stronger for Jon Ossoff. So again, these maps are dynamic. They change all the time, but there is a path, and Democrats have to do a lot of things right, and things have to go right for Democrats, but there is a path for Democrats to take control of the House and the Senate on those.
You know, I spoke to the progressive candidate in Michigan, Abdul El-Sayed,
yesterday.
Today.
I saw that.
No, today, actually.
Oh, it feels,
well, yeah, I guess it was yesterday because we are now into Wednesday. And he was making the positive case for his candidacy, and his argument was, it is about heart, not about head, that if you actually want to change the system, you've got to take a chance on the candidate who's running against the system. And right now, as I understand it, Ali, he is leading in the polls.
Yes.
He's ahead of the other two Democrats.
Versus a candidate who was recruited by Chuck Schumer. So Chuck Schumer takes some credit for some of the candidates he's recruited. Sherrod Brown running in Ohio, very good likelihood of winning. Roy Cooper in North Carolina, a guy who hasn't lost an election in 40 years and has run and won when Republicans have otherwise won. Not working out. There's an issue in Minnesota and an issue in Michigan where other candidates are running against the Schumer-nominated candidate. But Abdul El-Sayed is polling very well in Michigan. Primary polls are hard, but he's doing well.
Yeah, we're going to see, because Michigan is such an interesting state. It's a purple state. You have a Democratic governor, but Donald Trump has obviously won it a couple times now, and it's a very mixed-up population. And, you know, Abdul El-Sayed could be very popular. He could also be very unpopular in some corners, depending on your perspectives and, you know, I guess whether you have an R or a D in front of your name.
I also always think about Michigan in elections, in federal elections, because of the fact that they understand all the things, right? They understand manufacturing, they understand the loss of manufacturing, they understand trade, they understand tariffs.
Yeah.
They're at the center of a lot of these issues. And then to what he said, it's about heart. So that is going to be a very, very interesting race to watch.
So I wonder, Eugene, you've been talking about to the Democratic leadership on the campaign side of things. How do they feel? You and I were talking in the break about whether Democrats need to just let the candidates who are right for the state or right for the district run the race they need to run.
Right.
Is Abdul El-Sayed in Michigan that kind of candidate? Let him run the race he wants to run. And if not, why are Democrats nervous about him?
They're nervous about him for a lot of reasons. One of them is the Israel-Gaza issue, right? There's the question and the concern of how that might play out in Michigan. So that's one.
A very big Jewish population.
Exactly. Two is you have a Chuck Schumer and leadership who want who they want, right? So they want Haley Stevens, someone who, I was talking to a Democrat today, they were like, you know, I used to really like her, but there's something that happened in the campaigning, and campaigning shows you who someone is, right? And I think in different places in Michigan right now, they seem to want someone who's a little bit more charming. And frankly, the anti-establishment aspect of this has to do with them losing to Donald Trump in that state in 2024, right? They're looking at it and saying, you know, we might have to try something different. That's what the polling is showing. And at the end of the day, Abdul El-Sayed is charming. He's someone who is who gets it.
This is not something you might know off the top of your head, but I'm wondering, did Bernie Sanders do better than Hillary Clinton in Michigan Oh, in 2016, in the primary.
In the primary, it was she won it, but it was like there. I think she won it. Let's double check that.
We're going to double check it.
But it was competitive.
It's 2:45 in the morning, and no one's memory is that good.
Exactly. But the thing is, in 2016, this is what we've been talking about, kind of like the double haters, or people that shift, the Bernie Trump voters. And I think there's something that folks
Bernie won by a little over a point.
There we go. See, and so that is that aspect that's there in that state where folks are looking for someone who looks maybe a little bit more like Bernie Sanders ideologically.
Oh, so interesting. Ali Velshi.
By the way, there's a very close distinction between those two. Their stand on Medicare for All, which Abdul El-Sayed places very centrally in his campaign, and Bernie Sanders, who's a guy with a lot of message discipline, has done decades of keeping that central.
Yeah, he was very adamant about that when I was talking to him. We did talk about how Democrats would need the House, the Senate, probably a supermajority, and the presidency to get some of that stuff done, which is a tall order now and another tall order, maybe not that tall, we'll see, for 2028. All right, Eugene, thank you so much. Are you still sticking around?
Yes.
I hope you are. Don't go anywhere. I need you. Ali Velshi, thank you so much for walking us through all of that in the big board. I appreciate it. Coming up next, what is the future of Nancy Pelosi's seat? We're back after this quick break. All right, let's go back to California. MS Now's David Noriega has been reporting for us from Tom Steyer's headquarters in San Francisco tonight. People have left. Tom Steyer already spoke. He's going to wait to see if he does end up advancing. Right now, with the vote count in, he's in third. Again, that could change. What I've found interesting, David, is that he's running against billionaires, although he is a billionaire. He's poured a lot of money into this race. He seems to be having a hard time decoupling his ideas of taxing billionaires and going after billionaires and the fact that he's a billionaire himself.
Yeah, exactly. He's the anti-billionaire billionaire candidate. And speaking to voters today, I spoke to a number of them who were very drawn to his policy positions, but in some cases couldn't really get past the fact that he is himself, in fact, immensely wealthy. It's interesting listening to him talk tonight. He is very much the only candidate in this race who's running an unapologetically anti-establishment campaign from the left. His policy positions are all positions that resonate quite strongly with Democratic voters, in this political moment. Universal health care, taxing the rich, abolishing ICE, not only abolishing ICE, but he's actually proposed, directing the Attorney General to prosecute some of the ICE agents who have participated in these raids over the last year. But it isn't quite landing with voters as much as one might expect. Now, another factor to consider, though, Katie, is that stepping back and looking at the race, it's not just a question of individual candidates and their policy positions. It's the fact that no candidate in this race really stood out, right? There was something interesting that happened while I was interviewing voters outside a polling place in the Mission earlier today, which is that repeatedly, Katie, on a number of occasions, I had to remind voters of the names of the candidates who were running, including the candidates that voters themselves voted for. People would say, like, oh, I voted for the billionaires, like you mean Steyer, or I voted for the Latino governors, like Becerra. And yeah, this wasn't a race where people made that much of an impression. And I think all of them, to some degree, suffered from that. Now, as we talked about earlier today, Katie, it will be interesting to see if Steyer does, in fact, manage to inch past Hilton, the Republican candidate. Then the California governor's race is going to be a very interesting temperature check for this national question of whether, the Democratic electorate wants establishment candidates. It doesn't get really any more establishment than Becerra, or whether they're interested in an insurgent populist candidate like Steyer and are able and willing to look past his, billionaire status to do so. Katie.
Yeah, and a standout campaigner. I mean, look at what Gavin Newsom's been able to do with that perch as governor of California and the way that it's propelled him into the national dialogue. That usually does happen with California governors. I find it so interesting, David, and so telling that you had to remind people who they actually voted for, what their names were. Really an incredible detail in that reporting. David, always good to have you. Thank you so much for sticking around for us. And for the first time in almost 40 years, Nancy Pelosi's name did not appear on the ballot in California. And the big question is, who's going to replace her? The forever speaker endorsed San Francisco Supervisor Connie Chan. As of now, only State Senator Scott Wiener has advanced to the general election in November. Joining me now, senior political writer for the San Francisco Chronicle and host of its podcast, It's All Political, Joe Garofoli. Joe, really good to have you.
Hi, Katie.
So
how you
Nancy,
doing?
I'm great. Nancy Pelosi gone from California politics. It's a big moment.
It is a big moment. She did make her imprint on this race, though, by endorsing Connie Chan, sort of an 11th hour endorsement. I spent part of the last weekend with them. Connie Chan couldn't have her arm around Nancy Pelosi enough, and taking pictures from just about every possible angle. So her power is still there, and although it's a mixed bag in local races, the last two times Pelosi's weighed in on a local San Francisco races, those candidates have lost. But I think it carried more weight in that this was for the seat that she has held since 1987. So she looks likely to advance to the top two against Scott Wiener. But, you know, there are votes still to be counted.
What do you make of the power of her endorsement in that? I mean, if Scott Wiener does end up keeping the lead that he currently has, what does that tell you about where Democratic voters are?
Scott Wiener has been a part of the scene here as well in San Francisco. He's served several years on the Board of Supervisors. Then he spent the last couple of terms in Sacramento, where he's become a leader on a statewide leader in housing policy, which is the #1 issue here in California, the economy, which is rooted in the high cost of housing. And he has spearheaded several pieces of legislation to make it easier to build housing here. So he has built up a name and a reputation as someone who can actually get legislation passed. So Chan will have a very serious challenge if she makes it to the top two. He has. I went knocked on doors with all the three top candidates, and even when I was with Chan and Shreyas Chakrabarti, the third person in the race right now, many people on the street or at the doors were said, you know, I'd love to support you, but I've known Scott for 25 years or whatever. So it's going to be a challenge to beat Wiener in the general election in November.
Biggest question I have is, what are the Republicans going to do without Nancy Pelosi?
They'll have to find someone else to knock on, right? They have been for decades, as long as
Kevin McCarthy did it the other day to me on Bill Maher.
Like, she's not here. She doesn't. She's gone. And I think this is one of the things that Republicans struggle with, is like the boogeymen and women.
They don't have
of the
one right
yesteryear.
now.
They don't have one.
AOC, maybe.
Exactly, maybe.
All right, Eugene Daniels, Joe Garofoli. I love your vest. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Shout out to my friend Lady Sarah J for making this for me.
Nice. Good job,
only
Lady
a few
Sarah
days
J.
a year I can wear it.
I love it. You got one more coming up in November. Joe, thanks. Eugene, thanks. Our special primary election coverage continues after this.